What's up, everybody live here in our newsroom at Fox 5 DC. Welcome to the show here on August 20th. It is Monday. Hope you're already having a good Monday morning. You can see the newsroom behind me. We're going to be showing you some of the latest video that we have and tracking all of the live and breaking news that we have coming in to our sources on this Monday. But today, pretty exciting stuff to show you this morning, guys. You may know her as a former contestant on The Apprentice, later a staffer for President Trump inside the White House. Omarosa was here this morning on our morning show to speak with our anchor, Steve Shenevy, and there's a great interview I want to show you guys. She was right here in our studio to kind of explain her experience in the White House and her eventual souring of her friendship with President Trump, and then what led to her writing her book, Unhinged. So definitely stay tuned for that interview. We're also going to show you Melania Trump. FLOTUS is hosting, and she was actually just a few moments ago attending a cyberbullying summit event in the state of Maryland, just over the border here from DC. So we're going to show you what she had to say there at this anti-bullying event. And then also students from University of Maryland, the football team, are speaking out and talking about how they'll honor their teammate, their former teammate, Jordan McNair. He's the 19-year-old player who died of heat stroke 2 weeks after collapsing on the practice field at the University of Maryland. So we're going to show you our snippet there from the students. So with that, I hope you guys who are all on can kind of engage with us today. Let us know your comments and feedback on the stream. And hopefully you're watching us here on YouTube or on our website on fox5dc.com. We're glad that you're with us here, guys. So Let's show you that interview. Let's start right away with Omarosa. She was live in studio just merely less than 2 hours ago, opening up about her book and her experience in the White House.
The Apprentice, but that didn't distance herself from the reality show's host, Donald Trump. And when he became president, she signed up for a West Wing job and sang the praises of the new boss.
You all know him as the president. I know him as a friend. I know his heart.
But somewhere along the line, the relationship soured. Omarosa was shown the door, and she wrote a tell-all book. The book stung the president.
Lowlife. She's a lowlife.
But not quite as much as the secret tapes. And oh, there are tapes.
I don't want to negotiate. I've never had a chance to talk to you, General Kelly. Yeah, so if this is my departure, I'd like to have at least an opportunity to understand.
We can talk another time. This has to do with some pretty serious integrity violations. So I'll let it go at that.
I am not going anywhere. I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not intimidated. And I'm going to go toe-to-toe with him. Everything he throws at me, believe me, my tapes are much better than theirs.
She's hinted that there may be hundreds more recordings and possibly even emails and texts. And that reportedly has the White House rattled, as the New York Times puts it. The book is currently #1 on Amazon, and with that comes a lot of questions. And joining us now with more on Unhinged, an insider's account of the Trump White House, is author Omarosa Newman. Good to see you. Good morning.
Steve, always good to be here.
So here's my first question, all right? I'm going to dive right into this, and we'll get into the heart of the matter with the book, because you say in the book that your relationship with Donald Trump has come to, and I am quoting, a decisive and definitive end.
Yes.
Is it really over?
It's over.
Why? What was it that was that flashpoint?
Well, there were so many different moments throughout that first year in the White House. You know, it started to sour once he thought Frederick Douglass was still alive. I don't know if you remember that in February, but definitely around the time that he started insulting African Americans, African American athletes, congressmen and women, any opportunity he got to insult high-profile, prominent African Americans, he didn't miss the chance. And so I would take him to task about it, but he wasn't even concerned about how that was affecting our relationship with the community and how people treated me. So I would try to go out and do outreach, and people didn't want to hear it because he was insulting so many African Americans. And he was going back against his word in terms of doing great things in the African American community.
So in all fairness, you say that now and you spell that out quite eloquently in the book. But a lot of people say you were the only African American person of power in that inner circle. Why didn't you take him to task on this at the time?
I did, but the one thing that you know about Donald Trump, and you'll certainly see in Unhinged, you can talk to him about something in the morning. By the afternoon, his mind is scattered and he's forgotten. He may commit to say one thing in one briefing, and in the next briefing, he's tweeting out something that totally contradicts it. I talk about watching his mental decline in the past, particularly 2 years, but I've known him for 15 years, so I'm uniquely positioned to give him a little bit of what he's been giving out himself. But the truth of the matter is I was very concerned about him, and I shared these things in private. These aren't things that I would broadcast when I was in the inner circle, but now I'm sharing them with all of your viewers as well as the readers.
If something like that happened, if he said or did something that you took offense to, or you felt in this particular case it was a race issue that wasn't being communicated properly, and you took him to task on that and then it didn't follow through, or you saw a tweet otherwise, was it a roll your eyes moment, or did you feel like we really have to do something about this?
Well, the first time that I was on the receiving end of one of those Trump nuclear yelling displays, I went to him, particularly after our first month in office, about the things that we had committed to do. And he now starts to do these yelling things. He screams and yells at everybody around him. And I looked at him and was like, what is going on with you? What is wrong with you? I didn't realize that it wasn't just behavioral, that there was actually something, you know, neurological going on with him. But
and by that, you mean this is behavior that you had not seen in your relationship with him in the past? I
had not seen him, you know, completely forget things. I would brief him. Particularly, I was briefing him as we were preparing to go to an African-American church, and I gave him the names of the people, the pastor, and that sort of thing. I'm talking about 5 minutes before we walked in. By the time we got in, he couldn't remember not only where he was or why he was there or who he was going to meet with.
When we talk about your history with President Trump, it goes back years, 15 years now we're talking about. Before we talk about that, let's listen to a little bit, because you've been very, very supportive of him.
Oh, yes.
For 99% of those 15 years. Let's take a look.
when Donald Trump declared that he was going to run. You all know him as the president. I know him as a friend. I know his heart.
Donald Trump is a trailblazer on women issues.
And not only do I support him as a human being who has incredible character and a great vision, but his policies affect my community where I live in Los Angeles, and that's really why I stand by him.
And I believe that you will see that this president is going to be incredible for this country, and I am excited about what's happening with this administration. I'm very honored to be a part of it.
He was the right choice for America.
When I say Trump train, I want you to say choo choo. Y'all ready? Trump train! Trump train!
So the record needle scrapes across the record at this point. We do a complete 180. And the question I think a lot of people had, quite honestly, Omarosa, was after 15 years of that, why should people believe what you have to say now?
Well, Steve, first of all, I'm not the first person in America to have a friend who you've known for a very long time who starts to change and starts to act differently. Certainly, I know that we've all entered friendships with people thinking that they were one way, only to find out that they weren't someone who we thought we knew. And so that's why I think Unhinged is so important, why I talk about the entire journey. It was very interesting that the GOP put together a compilation of all of those things, because it could be done the same way of how Donald Trump talked so glowingly about me, but he reduced me just last week in a tweet to that dog. And so clearly this is a relationship that you have to get the behind the scenes story about and not just look at the surface, because yes, it is decisively, definitively over. I have no interest in being around a man who calls women wacky lowlives, dogs, and all the other names that he has attacked people with. Something is wrong with Donald Trump. He's not well, and he's unfit to serve as the president of the United States.
When you first saw that tweet that said that dog, what was your first reaction?
I was completely disappointed that Donald Trump has reduced the presidency to playground name calling, that he has no respect for the office, the highest office of this land, and to be on the receiving end, as you've so eloquently pointed out, after 15 years of someone to call me the worst name that you can call a woman. If he says that publicly, just imagine the things that he says about me privately. It's unacceptable for the leader of this country to behave that way. And that's why he basically completely backs up my statement about him being unhinged.
On the other side, the taping, that incident obviously catapulted you into the spotlight as well.
Thank God I did, because if I didn't, I don't believe that anyone would believe that the chief of staff, a 4-star general in the Marines, would take a woman in the basement of the White House, the most secure office in the land, take me in the basement of the Situation Room and threaten me by saying things could get ugly for you, or we don't want any damage to your reputation. I write about it. In fact, I opened the book with that scene in the Situation Room.
But you talk about in the book that you didn't know why you were going in there. So at that point, why make the decision to record something when you don't know what's about to happen?
Well, first of all, getting invited into the Situation Room at like 6 o'clock in the evening is a little suspicious. Getting invited into the Situation Room by General Kelly, who had gone almost 6-7 months refusing to meet with me without looking me in my eyes, ignoring me in all the senior staff meetings, I knew that there was something going on. And to give no reason whatsoever, usually when they invite you into the Situation Room, they'll say it's a briefing on hurricanes or it's an update on this situation. His office would give no reason why they were calling me into that room. It raised enough red flags for me to say, I better protect myself.
Do you have more recordings?
Absolutely.
Will you release those recordings?
Oh, absolutely.
What's
I think
the
the American people have a right to know what's going on in the White House. And I am fully prepared to blow the whistle on the corruption that's going on there. And as much as you can read about it in my book, I think it's different when you hear it. And that's why the tapes have been so powerful to corroborate all the things that I've shared. If you see it in quotes in my book, then you know that it's verified, it's corroborated, and it's documented.
Let me ask you this, though. It's a perfect opportunity for you to cover yourself. It's a perfect opportunity for you to get great material to put into a book, which a lot of people are saying that's why you did this.
Well, no, let's be clear. I'm an author. So this is my third book. This isn't my first book. I write about the things that happen in my life. I wish I wasn't writing about the very dismantling of the most sacred office.
But if you
I
looked
don't
at
want
this,
to
Omarosa,
see this presidency being turned into the mess that we see every day. I thought, as you saw in those recordings, I had such optimism for the Trump presidency, only to find out that he conned this country. He's conning and deceiving this country every single day. And I was a part of that. And I regret that, Steve.
But if you looked at a senior staffer or any official in any other administration, if they would have gone in and they would have recorded any of those top people, the president, any cabinet members, what do you think the reaction would have been there if this would have happened in the last administration?
Well, I think that this administration is unlike any other. One of the things, if you've read the book, you know this isn't my first tour of duty in the White House. I served during the Clinton administration. During that administration, there was a special counsel investigation into the way Bill Clinton treated interns in the Oval Office. And certainly there needed to be some exposing of some of the bad behavior that happened in that White House. I'm going to tell you something. In this culture of the Trump White House, I would encourage people to have the courage to stand up, to speak up, and to share what you have, because there are things that are happening in this White House that should never, ever happen in this country.
Do you regret accepting the position?
No, because I did. I thought that when I took that oath to the Constitution, I thought that I was truly going to make a difference. But very quickly, I realized that with this president, it's impossible with him tweeting every 5 minutes that there is a witch hunt and people are after him. It's impossible to be successful in the job that I was doing when he wants to start a race war in this country.
Which you brought up yesterday as well. More accusations there, along with calling him a racist, a bigot, a misogynist.
Which he proves to be true every single day, unfortunately. Every single day he comes out and shows why more and more and more we see that he's unhinged.
I have to ask both of you, you've known each other for 15 years, yeah. You and President Trump. You are both very strong personalities. You are both very strong when it comes to gamesmanship. Are you trying to outplay the president at this point?
First of all, it's the art of the deal. I studied under him for 15 years. I had to have picked up some things, and the most important thing is that people need to know your story, and that's what I'm telling.
But you're quoting his story when you talk about your story now.
Yeah, well, it's intertwined. 15 years, I don't laugh at the amount of time I spent with Donald Trump. It's not something that I would have to say that I regret going on The Apprentice. It changed my life. That's how I got to meet all of you all. But one of the things I did to go beyond just the book on my website on Omarosa.com, I put some of the things that I saw, some pictures and some videos, so that you can get a little more context. So you're not just seeing a quick interview of me without understanding how very painful this was for me as well.
Certainly have the city and the nation's attention right now. Omarosa, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, the book is out now on Hinge. We'll be back with more after this.
So again, that was Omarosa on Good Day DC this morning. Our anchor Steve Sheneby sitting down with her. Let us know what you think, guys. Like I said, she was in studio just a few hours ago, opening up about her time in the White House and now what it means to sort of be out and be secretly recording some of these meetings and then putting them out there for people to say. And she did confirm that she has more of those tapes, where that came from, and she will be releasing them. No real straight answer on the timeline of that, but we'll have to see. That remains to be seen. Let's move on to a couple of the top stories of today, and then we'll go over to First Lady Melania Trump and her event in Maryland a few moments ago. Again, if anything happens live or is breaking, we'll break in with that video from our newsroom here in DC. Thanks for watching.
Church bells ring out, marking the first Sunday Mass since a new report alleging widespread child sex abuse by Pennsylvania clergy. The findings from the Attorney General's office identify 300 Catholic priests accused of abusing more than 1,000 children dating back to the 1940s.
I think it's a terrible shame what was happening over the years. I really do. What else can you do? You just have to pray for the victims and pray that the church will get things right from now on.
The grand jury report also sheds light on attempts to cover up the crimes. A Vatican spokesman has responded, saying the Holy See feels shame and sorrow, adding the church must learn hard lessons from its past and there should be accountability for both abusers and those who permitted abuse to occur. Worshippers say that accountability is the only way for the church to recover.
I would like the Pope to take away their rights to be a priest, to not cover it up, to have them be prosecuted the same as anyone else.
Sandy Marinray is among Catholics who want to stand by their faith and are counting on the Holy Father to intervene.
This would not keep me from putting money in the basket, but this has to be taken straight to the Pope and have it rectified.
You need to address it somehow and not try to push it under the table.
Some Pennsylvania churches have been holding services to pray for the victims, including a Mass of Forgiveness in Harrisburg. Brian Yennis, Fox News.
Rescue efforts continue as soldiers and rescue crews try to help people stranded by heavy flooding following days of incessant rain in southern India's Kerala state. Downpours which started on August 8th and have not let up, causing the worst flooding seen in the area in more than a century. Hundreds have lost their lives due to rising waters and landslides, and hundreds of thousands more are displaced. Crews increased their efforts over the weekend, going through flood-stricken neighborhoods, evacuating people by boat. A mother and her baby, stranded on the roof, were rescued by helicopter. For harder-to-reach areas, airlifts are the only way to get people out.
I've lost my house. I've lost everything that I had. I'm staying in a relief camp, and I need help.
Volunteers are pitching in, gathering food and water, medical supplies, and clothing for those in need. Trucks delivering the aid where they could, and troops dropping supplies and food to thousands still stranded in more remote areas. Weather conditions are expected to improve over the next 5 days in most, but not all, of the affected areas. Still, authorities now fear an outbreak of water and airborne diseases for those affected by the flooding. In Los Angeles, Robert Gray, Fox News.
People are not the only victims of California's wildfires.
99 markers behind us.
Yeah, this bear she is definitely a survivor.
But to help this 1.5-year-old female American black bear survive, veterinarians at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife are thinking outside the box. Their technique? Get this, suturing fish skins to the bottoms of her burned paws. Tilapia skin dressings. And the bandages?
So we use rice paper and tamale husks.
That the bear lived through the car fire at all is as unlikely as the path she's taking to healing. She'd gotten through the blaze to a stream near Whiskeytown, Shasta County, California.
She was lying on a tiny little patch of ground that was the only piece that wasn't burnt, and everything around her was burnt.
Her paw pads were burnt raw. Now, if she were a dog or a cat, veterinarians would put new bandages on every day or so, and they'd physically stop her from chewing the bandages off because they're made of plastics and other unhealthy stuff.
We can't do that with a wild bear. Every time we work with them, we have to immobilize them and anesthetize them, and that is traumatic for them.
That's where the tilapia, the fish skins, come in. And it's working. You can see in this time progression the pads starting to grow back on the bottom of her paws. The goal is to get her healthy enough to get her back into the wild in time to hibernate.
A lot of neighbors in the Quail Hollow community tell me they're going to look through their kids' stuff and make sure their neighbors do too, to look for anything that looks like candy but is actually drugs.
Like Flintstone vitamins.
Looks are deceiving. Deputies believe what looks like colorful cartoon candy is actually MDMA, known as Molly or ecstasy. Investigators tell Fox 5 what's even more disturbing is who they suspect was selling them, a dad and his 17-year-old daughter. Drug agents say the daddy-daughter duo was out to make a sale to local kids.
It's scary. Like, we moved here and this seemed like a really nice neighborhood.
Wednesday night, officers and drug agents from the Johns Creek Alpharetta Forsyth Drug Task Force surrounded the home on Balsam Bark Drive in the upscale Quail Hollow community in Forsyth County. Months ago, investigators say they got a tip that then 16-year-old Morgan Williams was selling marijuana to nearby high school students. Detectives say they learned Dad was in on the whole thing, and after several months of undercover surveillance, raided the family's home at a storage unit, finding more than 2 pounds of pot, 87 MDA pills, and 22 grand in cash.
It's sad. It kind of makes me sad for the 17-year-old, you know, having your dad be that type of influence on you.
The bust, even more shocking. to neighbors who know the family's other bizarre run-ins with the law. In 2015, wife and mom, Elaine Williams, was arrested after deputies say she posted an ad on Craigslist asking for a baby to give to her then 14-year-old daughter. Charges were later dropped.
I don't know if we'll be hanging out over there at all.
Shauna Greaves is one of many parents concerned their younger kids could have gotten their hands on these pills. Neighborhood leaders tell me they're sending a message to parents to scour their kids' things.
He gets into all sorts of things. He would be into that, so thinking it was candy.
In Forsyth County, Jacqueline Schultz, Fox 5 News.
I don't know, it was like normal, I guess. I didn't really feel anything.
Sarah, along with her sisters and mother, walked the halls of Santa Fe High School. The family shared this video from inside the school with Fox 26. Today was the second day that Santa Fe ISD offered a walkthrough of the Santa Fe High School campus, something they typically offer for new students, but they're inviting all students and their parents since some students felt that they were not ready to return to class back in May following the shooting.
I think it's good to go there ahead of time before you gotta go for your first day, right? So you can get that feeling, I guess, coming back to school, being in there. Because I don't know how it would have been if we just came back. First time being there was the first day of school. That'd been weird, a little weird.
Santa Fe ISD says this is part of the healing process and want the students to feel safe when they return on August 21st. The students were not allowed inside the construction areas or classrooms, but there were counselors and faculty present to offer assistance.
They want the kids to be able to go to the school and see that everything's okay.
Sarah's mother, Sonia, tells Fox 26 that she has 3 daughters attending the high school. She tells them to be strong and always pay attention to their surroundings.
I don't feel anything negative about the school. I mean, that could have happened anywhere. And that person just picked that spot to do it.
As for Sarah, she's more concerned with focusing on her health so that she can start school on time.
It's just, I don't know if I'll physically be able to go back because it hurts to be up. And also when I'm hot, my arm starts to hurt. So we'll see when the time comes when it gets closer to school.
Natasha Geigel reporting, Fox 26 News.
I try to make things that bring up emotions that I feel are out there, that are common to us all, that are on some level archetypal.
Michael Hopka's work is often called dark, but he says it's realistic.
Life is difficult. There's a lot of trials and tribulations to life, to everyone's life. We all struggle. I think the darkness is really a reflection of anxiety that I feel, we all feel.
Hopka traces his anxiety to his family's roots. Both of his parents are Holocaust survivors whose entire families were wiped out by the Nazis.
The reality of understanding that you come from a family that perished and from so much suffering, there is a sense of responsibility that you have to express some of that.
That expression is pronounced in many of his works, some more obviously, like The Selecting Hand, a depiction of the selection process many of his own relatives faced in the concentration camps.
The vision that I understood of Mengele in the concentration camps, selecting which Jews will die and which Jews will work. And it expresses the hell that it was.
Hopka's handprint shows up in a number of his works over the last few decades, including one of his most recent ones, which he showed us in his Red Hook studio.
So this is called the schematics of angst. What does that mean?
Well, I identified with this figure as having angst in this world of being produced by monstrous forces that we can't really figure out and being observed continuously, like we are, and in the sense that social media is always observing us.
Speaking of social media, platforms like Instagram have helped Hopka share his art with a vast audience, though he's already internationally known. His works are in the permanent collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the MoMA, among a long list of other museums, and his paintings are sold in galleries across Europe. The way he tells it, his big break was just luck, an art-collecting cardiologist discovering some of his early etchings and sending his work to the MoMA, which accepted them. That cardiologist would turn out to be a Holocaust survivor himself.
I think because he was so aware of reality, having been a survivor of Auschwitz, and also being a doctor. Life and death was his trade. He was able to relate to it and was able to bridge my being a complete unknown artist to the Museum of Modern Art.
Luck is another theme in his work and his family life. It's how his father says he managed to survive.
Everything he told me was luck, so I see that in my career and all people's survival. Luck is a big factor.
As for Hoffa's career, it continues, as both an artist and now a musician too. He and his wife Yonad are about to release an album with their band Feeding Goats. He can't predict what his next great piece of art will be. All of them, he says, are based on feelings, not ideas.
As the saying goes, work makes you free. It's how I live.
Stacey Delicat, Fox News.
Hearing the words cancer whenever I was that young just was really scary.
Sadie Keller's cancer diagnosis, leukemia, came when she was 7 years old, a second grader.
I've been through a lot of hard stuff. 53, 54.
Sadie, in her sickness, began collecting toys for other sick cancer kids, stuck in hospitals at important times, like Christmas. Her gift delivery known as Sadie's Sleigh.
I just want to help all of them, and it's just really nice to see them be happy.
Teaming up with Congressman Mike McCall, Sadie's trying to help them be not only happy, but healthy again.
I first met Sadie when she was in remission at that time.
That was 2015. Sadie lobbied Congress with Representative Mike McCall to pass a bill that would allow the best adult treatments for cancer be studied for use in children.
It's the advocates like Sadie that really get members of Congress. They can say no to me. They can't say no to her.
The two back at it on the Hill again this year, getting lawmakers to pass McCall's STAR Act, or Stamp Out Childhood Cancer Act.
It's probably the most comprehensive childhood cancer bill passed by the Congress. It's going to move things forward in terms of funding, in terms of research that we can do, and in terms of doctors being able to share information.
The president expected to sign the bill, which started with an idea to McCall from Sadie in the coming days.
We're a great team together. You know, to get a bill passed in the Congress is not an easy task these days, and it's bipartisan. Everybody loves old Sadie.
Who is working in big ways to make life better for sick cancer kids.
Girls are done. High five.
Sean Rabb, Fox News.
December 2015 in San Bernardino. These two terrorists murdered more than a dozen at a social services center. The couple was later killed by police in a gun battle.
We have one down outside the car, one down inside the car.
Focus soon shifted to who knew contacts, communications, and content contained on one of the shooter's phones. The FBI pressed Apple to unlock the iPhone to get access, but Apple refused. Instead, the FBI paid a third party that figured out how to break in.
We only use the tools that are given to us under the law.
With phone security evolving, so are the latest hacking tools. The newest may be GrayKey, developed by Grayshift last year. The company promotes a mission of supporting local, state, and federal government agencies by removing barriers. According to Grayshift documents, GrayKey is the next-generation digital forensic access tool that successfully unlocks Apple devices like iPhones or iPads. This small box has two lightning cables that plug into iPhones. Eventually, it will display the passcode on the screen, and all the files can be downloaded onto the GrayKey and accessed by computer.
What they're doing isn't best for everyone's security.
Jeremy Galula is the Tech Policy Director at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He fears GrayKey could eventually fall into the wrong hands.
But today's law enforcement tool will become tomorrow's criminal tool.
How do you think we prevent it?
I mean, the right way to prevent it is for a company like Apple to continually update its security.
While constant software updates are in the works, 2 investigates found major money is being spent to breach security loopholes. Grayshift has tried its best to keep Graykey under wraps, even protecting its website. But we requested records from 12 Bay Area police departments and found 1/3 either have or are getting a Graykey.
It's not a surprise at all.
California Highway Patrol has had one since May. The annual license costs $15,000 and can be used up to 300 times a year. CHP turned down an interview, but said Graykey is critical for us to access information and is used for all levels of criminal activity. So far, CHP has used that single Graykey to unlock at least 75 Apple devices.
First your phone, then your home.
Groups have protested, claiming police don't need Graykey and can already get information from the cloud, like calling and texting records. Still, San Jose police bought 2 Graykey licenses in May for $27,000. San Mateo has one too, already used in a couple cases. And Santa Clara County is planning on paying $15,000 a year for a subscription and device.
There should be a community input process so that the community can say yes or no, we think this is or isn't a good use of our police resources.
While some prosecutors say a warrant is required to crack the code and access information, Apple may be trying to fix its security vulnerabilities.
So it really is just this cat and mouse game.
Because Grayshift is also advancing, planning to give police equal access to your personal information.
Motherhood is a full-time job with constant overtime and limited breaks. Mothers are regularly on the go, and the demands can be overwhelming. Psychology professor Nava Silton says that moms often need a recharge.
Motherhood can be very stressful, whether it's financial stresses, time stresses, just trying to get a whole lot done in a very short period of time. And so I think it's really important for mothers to be rejuvenated and refreshed.
Moms are taking the much-needed time for themselves with a momcation, a vacation with other moms who understand the need for me time.
It was a great experience. I'm glad I did it.
Judy Kosh is a mom of 2 boys and knows what it feels like to be on call 24/7.
It's nonstop. We're this activity, that activity, this sport, this class. It's constant go, go, go.
A close friend convinced Judy to take time for herself.
We're talking and she said, you know, I go on these mom trips all the time. Why don't you come? I kind of laughed at her. I'm like, what do you mean a mom trip? I can't leave my kids. I can't leave my husband. No, you have to come.
For a change, moms are able to do whatever they want. Or do nothing at all.
A momcation typically runs anywhere from about 2 to 3 days to up to a week. And this time off is not only a benefit for mom, it's also a benefit for the rest of the family.
Nava says that it's good for children to see their parents' needs met.
I think it's very important for kids to see that balance that ideally needs to be achieved in a family situation. I came back, I was a better mom, a more patient mom, a better wife. You know, you learn to appreciate what you have at home because you got to have that break from it all.
Audrey Puente, Fox News.
Chop dinner! At state fairs around the country, the usual staples of greasy treats and finely groomed livestock
Easy there, boy.
are accompanied this year by political discussion.
This is our Super Bowl of getting together.
Over the noise at the Iowa State Fair's cattle barn, you can catch talk between farmers over this year's hot topic, trade wars.
You know, it's a good opportunity to sort of air out these issues and see where they're at. And as I said before, it's an opportunity for politicians to then listen into those conversations.
Politicians like Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. Thank you. Well aware of the pressure farmers face as a result of retaliatory tariffs from some of the U.S.'s top trading partners.
Our farmers are willing to give, this administration some flexibility to get the negotiations done, but I am telling you, the closer that it gets to harvest, the anxiety continues to escalate.
Last month, prices for agricultural exports fell at the steepest rate since 2011.
That's a good question.
Despite the tricky year ahead for many of these farmers, I could not find a single one who called Trump's tariffs the wrong move.
People in agriculture also are in it for the long haul. They're big picture people.
I, for one, am willing to wait and have some short-term pain as long as it brings some long-term gain. And I think most people around here agree with that sentiment.
I think he's thinking for the future and in the long run.
But the Trump administration faces pressure to to act soon.
We will stand with American farmers 100%.
Many farmers warning without speedy negotiations and the introduction of new export markets, come back next year and they won't be so Iowa nice. In Des Moines, Iowa, Emily Ikeda, Fox News.
For most people who dream of being a mermaid, a dream is all it will ever be. But one company, Aqua Mermaid, is changing that. And it all begins with a fin. Just ask instructor Desiree Reed, who's been in the mermaid game for almost 5 years.
Being a professional mermaid allows me to perform as a mermaid for kids and adults at various events around the valley.
There are many perks of being a mermaid, but Desiree says the best part for her is soaking in the smiles.
It's pretty magical. One of my favorite things is seeing the reactions for the kids when they get to see the real live mermaid. It's a dream come true for them.
Being a mermaid doesn't have an age limit. For adults, there are mermaid water aerobics focused on strengthening your core. Instructor Karen Hill says the thanks she receives for fulfilling a lifelong dream is pretty cool.
Thank you so much. This is something I've always wanted to do. I've gotten to live my dream of being a mermaid.
Phoenix is just one of 6 U.S. cities that Aqua Mermaid has a school in. You can book a private class or drop in on one offered at the Point Hilton Tapatio Cliffs Resort. But if you're on vacation, be prepared to fall in love and make sure you have a little extra room in your suitcase.
As soon as they're done with the class, they're like, "Mom, can I get a tail?"
Marcy Jones, Fox 10 News.
So this is one of 11 apartments.
Yes, this is. Come on in.
It's called New Beginnings.
We received a grant from the VA to provide apartments for 22 vets here beginning October 1st.
A $350,000 grant.
So privileged, so blessed to get this grant from the VA.
To help our city's heroes.
We want to give them the best we can. They gave us the best they could.
The New Beginnings program, complete with free lunch and dinner every day. Amen. Free transportation and workforce training. All of that available for up to 2 years for veterans and their families.
We have vets living in their cars. We have vets that are homeless.
But now they're asking for your help.
What we don't have is furniture. We're looking for 22 single beds. We're looking for end tables. We're looking for dressers.
To donate your furniture, time, or skills to this project.
We want our heroes to have the best. We want their first impression to be, this is my new home.
I think it's great that we are going to be able to help the veterans because they really deserve it.
Let's do this together. Let's help these vets as a community and really make a difference and give them the best chance to succeed.
In Colorado Springs, I'm Samantha Marks, reporting for Fox 21 Local News right now.
It's as Americana as apple pie and the 4th of July. Coca-Cola has been a part of our history for more than 125 years.
It's Americana, and yes, it's our culture, not only our culture, but those in other countries as well.
Roland Hill, an auctioneer for Blue Leaf Estate Auctions, is getting ready for a big sale.
Coca-Cola was founded in 1886, and a lot of the products, a lot of the memorabilia from the turn of the century, the last century, turn of the 1900s, is really collectible because there's not a lot of it out there.
There's a mirror from the 20s, a fridge from the 50s, an ice chest, a tray circa 1930s, according to the trademark. There's only one other like it in existence, and it's valued at least $30,000.
I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company.
You can look at this tray, and this tray, it's not that old, but you can tell it's been around a while because it's faded, you know, and it's kind of beat up. You know, so you can tell that it's an old tray. It's old. It's not, you know, reproduced and put out for sale. Donnie is the guy that owns it. He's the gentleman that owns this stuff.
The collection also includes smaller items, toys, Coke bottles. No matter the price tag, to Coca-Cola collectors, everything here is priceless. Anita Roman, Fox 10 News.
Kind of a feel-good story right there. And also, I love that old Coca-Cola commercial. If you remember, that's the ad that they were actually creating in the finale of the Mad Men series. So if you guys were fans of that show like I was, you'll remember that was sort of the ending. Not to give it away, but that's part of the last episode ever. Let's switch gears a little bit and take you away from some of the top stories and go to an event this morning locally back here in Maryland area. So we're part of the DMV here, DC, and then Maryland and Virginia, of course, surrounding it. So we reach out to that whole area for news. And of course, the President and the First Lady are part of our news cycle. First Lady Melania Trump attended and spoke at a cyberbullying event in Maryland this morning. It looked really interesting. There were some other sort of young person speakers as well, and she opened up with some remarks. So take a look.
Educational organizations, youth programs, and law enforcement. I also know we share one goal: to pave a smooth way forward for our children, our next generation. I launched my Be Best campaign in May with a focus on the many issues facing children today. One of them being the safe and responsible use of social media. In today's global society, social media is an inevitable part of our children's daily lives. It can be used in many positive ways, but can also be destructive and harmful when used incorrectly. This is why Be Best chooses to focus on the importance of teaching our next generation how to conduct themselves safely and in positive manner in an online setting. I have been so inspired by the children I have met in my time as First Lady, and believe our next generation has unlimited potential to impact our world in positive ways. As an example, I recently had the privilege of meeting several bright students who are part of Microsoft's Council for Digital Good. In addition to sharing their 15 beliefs of how to be healthy and safe online, they each showed me individual projects representing their thoughts and ideas on what responsible behavior means to them. I was impressed by their deep understanding of how important it is to be safe, and was inspired by their sincere commitment to reducing peer-to-peer bullying through kindness and open communication. I encourage technology and social media companies, schools, and community groups to establish more opportunities for children, such as Microsoft's Council for Digital Good. By listening to children's ideas and concerns, I believe adults will be better able to help them navigate this often difficult topic. Let's face it, most children are more aware of the benefits and pitfalls of social media than some adults, but we still need to do all we can to provide them with information and tools for successful and safe online habits. Thank you all again for being here today. Our children deserve all of the opportunities we can give them to grow up happy, healthy, socially responsible adults. And your commitment to this topic is an example of one of those opportunities. I look forward to today's discussion and to working with all of you in the future. God bless you and your families, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Mrs. Trump for joining us today to share her insights and highlight the Be Best campaign. It is a true honor. We applaud you for your dedication to bettering the lives of children throughout the country. Thank you. Our next speaker is a University of Texas college student and activist. He is here today to tell his story and highlight his outstanding work as an active bullying activist. Please welcome Joseph Granwald.
Thank you for inviting me to address such an impressive audience. Please first bear with me. I'm a little nervous. I've never spoken in front of this many people before, not to mention in front of such high-level guests. But I really care about this topic, and I would like to share my ideas with you. One reason I care is because of my own experiences with bullying. I was bullied throughout middle school and the beginning of high school. The bullying began as taunts thrown at me on the school bus, and that's how it was for most of middle school. High school, on the other hand, is where the bullying became much, much worse. Every day, I was verbally harassed in the hallways by one particular student, who would goad other students into joining him. The verbal abuse eventually progressed into physical harassment in front of crowds of my classmates. It got even worse, and it became violent. All while this was going on, I was being harassed on social media by kids using multiple fake accounts. Because the bullying was also online, I couldn't escape it no matter where I was. Not at school, not at home, nowhere. Being bullied led me to be an activist, but most kids who are bullied just don't have the support systems or the resources that I had and are not able to do that. But we might ask ourselves, why are kids bullied, right? Often it's because they're perceived to be different in some way. Maybe they're awkward. Maybe they have difficulty with social cues. Or maybe they're from a different country. Or they're LGBTQ and gay like I am. Or they have a medical or psychiatric issue. But you know what, let's take a closer look at some of the stories I've encountered. I've been working on kids on gaming networks, and I'll speak on that more in a minute. But while these kids I've met on gaming networks are not necessarily representative of all kids who are cyberbullied or just bullied, I've come across some kids with some harrowing stories. And these are real. These are all real. Imagine you're a closeted, bisexual, 16-year-old living in a very rural Midwestern community. And your home is a cabin with no heat and no air conditioning. The school you attend is small, and there are only a couple dozen kids in your grade. Some of them bully you at school and on social media, kids who know you and some who don't, but they all call you names. And sometimes they tell you to just kill yourself. Others ignore you, and there's no school counselor in your school. One of your parents is a drug addict, and both parents don't seem very interested in your life. Unsurprisingly, you're depressed, but when you try to talk to your parents, you're told to buck up. You're fine, walk it off. And you have no one to talk to. Now imagine you're a 17-year-old male who lives in a trailer in a rural part of the South with your elderly grandmother. Your mom died a couple months ago from heart problems, and you have no health care. You're bullied and harassed for being overweight and poor, and you have no one to talk to. Now imagine you're a gay 15-year-old African-American student who lives in a rural area in the Northeast with a large and white foster family. You're also one of the only African-American students at your school. You're the target of multiple instances of racist bullying from students, both verbal and physical. School staff don't help, and the school pegged you as a bad kid a long time ago. You've been suspended multiple times. Your foster parents are abusive towards you and your half-sister. And you have no one to talk to. These stories are all about males because they are the people I've met on gaming networks. A few of the details have been changed to protect anonymity, but nothing, unfortunately, has been exaggerated. I have to say, their resilience in the face of such challenging circumstances is something I think we can all admire. But we might ask ourselves, what should be done? But I'll tell you a little bit about what I've been doing. In high school, I helped create an anti-bullying initiative. With my principal's support, another student and I designed and delivered workshops for every freshman English class in my high school. Our goal was to humanize kids who are different and to convey to students the power that their words and actions carry. One of the things we did talk about was the ways we are connected, and we didn't just focus on all our differences. Another thing is we would discuss the likely percentage of the student body that are LGBTQ and how that meant most students probably had LGBTQ friends, whether they knew it or they didn't. But here are the three main takeaways from the work we did. One, that it's better to have programs led by students than adults. Two, that bystander intervention is a key part of the solution. And I cannot emphasize that one enough as well. But maybe most importantly, I think the main goal should be to activate students' natural empathy, because we all have the power to be kind, and we're all, I think, born being kind, but the world takes a toll on us. If we can somehow access that empathy, I think we'll be in a much better place going forward. In addition, our work emphasized the power of bystanders to reduce bullying. Bullies target students who are isolated from the rest of their peer group and then isolate them even further. When I was harassed, not one person watching stuck up for me. Not one person. Active and supportive bystanders are the most important line of defense between bullies and their victims. And while the most effective thing a bystander can do may be to directly confront the bully, that can be risky for a kid who's intervening. So even something as little as asking the bullied student if they're all right can make a huge difference. And I know that if someone had come up to me and asked me if I was all right, that would make a world of difference to my ninth grade self. In my experience, students themselves are better messengers rather than school staff or other adults. Those who have experienced bullying rather than school administrators can take the lead in educating and activating student bystanders, as they, the victims, can use their experiences to connect and generate empathy in a much more organic way. When I spoke to students about my experiences, much like I spoke to you guys now, they would often connect these with experiences in their own lives. And as far as I'm concerned, the more connections students build with each other, the better. Especially when in the context of respecting differences among students. While our efforts in school focused on LGBTQ students and their struggles, the strategies we use can be applied to all types of bullying. It's all about real and perceived differences. And both cyberbullying and in-person bullying are influenced directly by the culture of any given school. In addition, bullying is not just confined to the school setting. It happens in our homes, happens in our communities, and it happens on the national level. And it happens online. Cyberbullying is especially destructive because the bully doesn't have to see the victim and the effect of the bullying. There's no eye contact. So it's easy to distance yourself from any consequence or emotional reactions from the victim. It's a method of bullying for the most cowardly among us, but I think we can all agree that bullying in and of itself is a cowardly act. The same approaches that worked in conventional face-to-face bullying are likely to also work with cyberbullying. Student-led programs, bystander intervention, and activation of students' natural empathy are all ways that can be used to deal with both cyber and physical bullying. As I was putting this talk together, one piece of information jumped out, and this is a statistic from the Human Rights Campaign. 73% of LGBTQ youth say they are more honest about themselves online than in the real world. Although this statistic is about LGBTQ youth, its implications are far, far broader. I believe online spaces can be a lifeline for marginalized youth and those at risk for bullying. The right kind of online environment can be a counterbalance to the isolation they experience in their physical communities. At-risk youth need online spaces that are both safe and uplifting. As I mentioned before, one of the ways I've been exploring this is through online gaming communities, such as Xbox Live. Over time, I became the organizer of a community and now mentor kids with a wide range of struggles, some of which I mentioned earlier. They often come to me or each other for advice or even just to talk about their day to anyone in the group. Many kids desperately need positive social interactions with their peers. And while online is no substitute for real life, it can provide real connections to break through these kids' isolation. In conclusion, I know that we all care deeply about bullying, regardless of what form it takes or where it comes from, or we wouldn't be here today. So let's work together to make sure that our common humanity and capacity for empathy is celebrated online, instead of what happens all too often these days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joseph, for your bravery in sharing these personal experiences with us. Please, another round of applause for Joseph. And good morning. Thank you to First Lady Melania Trump, Secretary Azar, Administrator Sagunas, and Joseph for all being here and for your leadership in this very important focus for this year's summit, which is cyberbullying. My name is Holly Ham, and I lead the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as Executive Director. I'm so pleased to be here with you today to engage and learn about an issue that is very personal to me. As a mother of 2 young children, their safety and security is my top priority. And that is why this work involving the federal partners in bullying prevention and everyone else here today is so important. All of you are working to create a safe environment for my children to play, to develop, and to learn. And I want to take a moment to thank you for all the work that you do. Bullying prevention has been and continues to be an integral part of our work at the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Our mission is to ensure that the doors of the federal government are open to the Asian American and Pacific Islander, or AAPI community, and to ensure that AAPI communities across the country have awareness of federal programs, are actually accessing these programs, and are better off for it. But when children, parents, teachers, physicians, and the list goes on and on, are preoccupied with bullying and its effects, it makes it very difficult for us to achieve our true potential. Bullying is an impediment that must be addressed and stopped, and it has no place in our communities. But every day, kids of all ages suffer from being bullied in schools across the country. In the AAPI community, this problem is often compounded by cultural, religious, and linguistic barriers that can keep our youth from seeking and receiving help. And we know that the issue of bullying, especially cyberbullying, is still pervasive in the API and so many other communities. And the work of the federal partners in bullying prevention and this summit's focus on cyberbullying is extremely important as we face difficult times on how to help our children manage their lives around the prevalence of social media, such as Facebook and Instagram, videos, instant messaging, and online gaming. How do we safely allow our children and other youth to engage in the digital society, but protect them from the potential harms in that digital society? And with that, I'd like to pause and introduce our first panel discussions moderator. That will be Mr. Aqua, and open up for our first panel discussion. So as Mr. Vora and the panelists come up, I want to say a few words. Mr. Vora hails from the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and is the Director of Strategic Initiatives. He spent many, many years in our office working alongside federal agencies, community organizers, educators, researchers, and families on this very topic. Please welcome Mr. Aqua Vora.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Holly. We're so pleased and honored that both the First Lady and Secretary Czar will be staying on to listen to our social media panel this morning. Thank you, Mrs. Trump and Secretary Czar, for the time you show your commitment to cyberbullying through your presence here today. One of the three main pillars of the First Lady's Be Best initiative is social media use, and she's committed to promoting positive online behavior very early in children's lives so that they use social media for positive change. We hope that this morning's panel with our esteemed experts will be informative to the Be Best campaign. So I want to start off, well, let me say first, with the increasing prevalence of cell phones and online platforms, the issue of cyberbullying continues to be a persistent issue. We're extremely pleased to bring together today an esteemed group of panelists to discuss the issue of cyberbullying, what can be done. I want to go ahead and introduce our panelist here before I take a seat right next to him. But to my right, we have Antigone Davis, who is the head of global safety at Facebook. Antigone is the head of global safety at Facebook, where she works with internal teams and with external safety organizations and government bodies to ensure that Facebook remains a leader in online safety and that stakeholders understand the steps Facebook takes to promote safety. She also spearheads the efforts of Facebook's Safety Advisory Board, a team of leading safety organizations from around the world who provide Facebook with cutting-edge research and advice on best practices, as well as its global safety network. Antigone serves on the International Advisory Board for We Protect, as well as the boards of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, the Family Online Safety Institute, and the National Network to End Domestic Violence. To her right, we have Jennifer Hamill, who's the Vice President of Legal and Policy at the Family Online Safety Institute, or FOSSI. Jennifer is the Vice President, where she directs FOSSI's government outreach and policy strategy. She helps FOSSI build relationships with government officials as well as external partners, and advises leading technology companies on best practices, policy developments, and emerging issues around online safety. Jennifer implements FOSSI's global projects and initiatives and manages the Washington, D.C. staff team. To her right, we have Coco Panel, who's the Public Policy and Government Relations Manager. She manages Google's engagements with the U.S. executive branch, working on initiatives around small business, workforce, education, digital safety, and healthcare, while also shaping Google's policy agenda around copyright, connectivity, and digital trade. During the 2016 election, Coco was Google's elections program manager, sculpting Google's advertising business in the DC market. Before that, Coco was AdWords community and social lead at Google and worked for Engage, Lens Global, Forbes Magazine, and the Senate Republican Conference. And to her right, lastly, we have Lauren Culbertson, who's the public policy manager at Twitter. Lauren works on Twitter's public policy team, whose mission is to help shape policies that defend and respect the user's voice. Twitter Public Policy also manages Twitter's nonprofit initiatives, as well as Twitter for Good, the company's philanthropic mission to make the world a better place by harnessing the power of Twitter. She's based in Twitter's Washington, D.C. office and oversees public policy issues related to safety and abuse in the United States. Before we get the panel started, I wanted to define what cyberbullying is. So cyberbullying is bullying that takes place over digital devices, like cell phones, computers, and tablets. Cyberbullying can occur through SMS, text, and apps, or online in social media, forums, or gaming where people can view, participate in, or share content. Cyberbullying includes sending, posting, or sharing negative, harmful, false, or mean content about someone else. It can include sharing personal or private information about someone else, causing embarrassment or humiliation. Some cyberbullying crosses the line into unlawful or criminal behavior. So we're very excited to hear from all of you and what efforts you're taking. We hope that this discussion is more of a conversation, but I'm going to start off with a few questions that I think are pressing. I think we've seen the data about cyberbullying and what's occurring online. I'm eager to hear a little bit more about, from your perspective, what you're seeing on your platforms, or from your perspective about cyberbullying generally, and more specifically with your work. I'm also interested in hearing a little bit more about what measures all of you are taking to address cyberbullying online. So perhaps we can start with that, right?
So first of all, I just want to take a minute to thank the Secretary, the First Lady, and Dr. Simonis for putting this event together and for your leadership on this issue. I also want to take a second to thank Joseph for speaking so eloquently about a topic that is, I think, very hard to speak about for a number of reasons, and in particular when you have been the victim of such egregious behavior. I think it takes tremendous courage to speak to us, so thank you. With regard to what we're seeing, first of all, I think Joseph hit the nail on the head when he really connected online and offline bullying. In almost all cases, when we see online bullying, it's connected to offline bullying. It almost never happens in isolation. I think that's important because I think what it really gets at is the behavior behind the actual harassment and the social and emotional learning skills that may be missing from the bully, as well as from the child that is being bullied, and the resiliency that that child may need, and teaching children those things. So that's one point I want to make crystal clear. I think the other thing that I think is very important is the approach that is taken, whether that's at the school level or that's online. So on our platform, we have policies in place that do not allow for bullying on our platform. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but it does mean that it violates our policies and there are consequences for it. We also provide our users with tools. What are the tools that they may need to manage that bullying? Whether that is blocking somebody, reporting somebody, limiting their scope of people that they're engaging with to people that are safe. How do they know how to do that? Those types of tools. Resources, making sure that all throughout our platform you can get help, but also so you can get access to resources to negotiating those relationships, as well as working with experts. So fundamental to our work is working with organizations like FOSI, organizations that really understand how these behaviors impact people and what types of resiliencies are needed to manage them. I mentioned that approach because I think that approach is not only applicable online, it's applicable offline. When we work with schools, for instance, that are doing a great job at preventing bullying, a lot of it is because they have done those same things. They have policies in place in school. They have tools for both the students and the educators. They have resources available, and they're connecting those dots. And perhaps most important to all of that is that the leadership within the school is setting the tone.
Thanks, Akil, and thank you to HHS and to the First Lady for being here today to elevate this very important issue. As Akil said, I am Jennifer Haley with the Family Online Safety Institute. We're an international nonprofit organization dedicated to making the online world safer for kids and their families. And we convene government, industry, and work with all of the partners here today and so many others to innovate and collaborate new solutions for online safety. We are constantly working to make the online world safer. We're trying to build a culture of responsibility online. I've been working in this space for nearly a decade and can say, we've looked at the trends over time. A number of years ago, we conducted a research study with Pew Research and Cable in the Classroom, where we were first starting to look at cyberbullying and meanness online and trying to figure out what kids do when they encounter this. Through that study, we heard a lot of kids ignored it. They didn't intervene. They didn't try to do things to help their friends. And we also found that they turned to their parents and their peers for help. So over the years, we've tried to figure out how to increase bystander awareness and intervention, and also how to get the right resources to parents. So we run a program called Good Digital Parenting. And through this initiative, we have blogs, resources, downloadable tools, and we're even out in communities talking to parents. And through this, we hear a lot about cyberbullying, concerns about what's happening, but we're also starting to hear some of the good things, where teens and people like Joseph are standing up and starting some great initiatives in their communities. So we've been really happy to see those trends start to change a little bit over time. We're working to make sure that parents have all the resources they need and other caregivers know what to do when their children, when their students, when others are bullied online or offline. We want to make sure that industry is creating the right tools, resources, and policies to make sure this doesn't happen. And we're also trying to educate new companies coming into this market to make sure that they have the right teams and policies in place so that if this does happen on their platforms, there are ways that kids can get help.
Thanks, Jennifer. So thank you to the federal partners, the First Lady and Secretary, for convening this group and your commitment on the issue. And thanks, Joseph, for being so brave and sharing your story with us today. So as I mentioned, my name is Coca Pennell. I'm with Google. And at Google and YouTube, online safety is an absolute priority for us. We really strive to create a positive environment for all of our users. And when it comes to cyberbullying, we really think about how do we empower youth to be digital leaders and not just kind of passive bystanders. We really want to equip them with sort of what they need to know in terms of how to deal with bullies and trolls online and when and where to seek help. So on that education piece, Google is engaged with some digital literacy programs across the country. An example is our Online Safety Roadshow. So in that roadshow, we partner with NGOs, educators, and parents on promoting a message of creating a positive environment online. And hopefully later on in the panel, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about that program and sort of all that's involved there. But I did want to speak specifically to what we're seeing on our platform and what we're doing to address it, and I'll sort of be specific to YouTube for a second. So on YouTube, as Facebook has as well, we have a specific policy against harassment and cyberbullying. And if you do a quick search, you can actually see the bullets that are involved in that policy and everything there. But and on the resources that you'll find online, we try to make it really easy for people to report instances of bullying. So if you see a video or comments that are abusive, there's a flag where you can easily report those. And we have a team that's monitoring the reported content for us 24/7. We also have a privacy complaints process whereby individuals or their parents can submit a report to us if content has been uploaded without their consent. And that same reporting team is monitoring that on a 24/7 basis as well. And then we also want to equip people that are using YouTube platform as a channel. They're uploading content there. So on the comment section, there's a lot of versatility in terms of how you can use it. So you can turn off comments altogether on your videos. You can select to pre-approve them before they post, or you can actually have certain words that are blocked from appearing from your comment section rather. So that's something we're doing on the product side, but I also wanted to mention before handing off to Lauren, we do think part of the importance of this is empowering parents and empowering adults. So there are a couple of apps that we at Google have developed. One is something called Family Link, and it allows parents to create a Google account for children under 13. And with that account, they have the ability to control what apps they have access to, how much time they're spending on those apps, how much time they're spending on their devices in general. The second app is something called YouTube Kids. So we wanted to bring the power of YouTube in a little bit more restrictive environment for families. So there are no public comments. Parents have the ability to really curate the content that their children are going to see within the app, so it gives them a lot of control there. So those two apps and a few of the things that we're doing on the product side are some ways that Google and YouTube are addressing the issue, but I'm really excited to chat more today and talk about our shared goals and sort of what we can accomplish together.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the First Lady, the Secretary, and Joseph for your leadership on this very important issue at Twitter. As Jack Dorsey, our CEO, has been talking about recently, safety and health on the platform is our #1 priority at Twitter. That's something that our entire company is focused on. As for the Twitter rules, we have strong rules against abusive behavior, and we've leveraged technology to help us enforce those rules. As part of our safety work, we've had a lot of changes on Twitter over the last year aimed at making Twitter a more positive and healthy place. And those are product changes like the mute feature. We've increased the amount of communication around our rules and enforcement, and made it easier for people to report cases in the app. We also, as Joseph mentioned, and I was really moved by your remarks, one beautiful thing about Twitter is that people come to Twitter to find community and to have conversations. We see this all the time. Teens who are struggling with thoughts of self-harm, who are questioning their identity or being bullied, or going to Twitter to find that community and to have that conversation, to reach out to other people who might find themselves in the same position and to find help and advice. So that's Twitter at its best. We also work with our partners. FOSI is an example of one, to have that outreach within the community and to help support several initiatives that are happening across the country. We also feel that education in the schools, it's very important. Starting at a young age is really important. I was actually in a school in the middle of December in Alaska, and every hallway had a sign saying, if you wouldn't say it in person, don't say it online. So I think starting kids really early and socializing that's really important. So through all these partnerships and this work here that we're doing today, I think we can make a big difference, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks. Thank you all. I think a convening like this, I think, is helpful in one major respect. From my perspective, is the opportunity to have all of you here together to hear about what's happening and what's going on. I think that lends itself to really thinking about how can models that you're creating potentially be replicated or what's working. So I guess the question to all of you in an ever-changing environment is, what are one or two successes that you think you've had in addressing bullying that can potentially be a model for others on the panel or folks in the audience here that's really working for you right now?
So I think certainly at Facebook there are at least two that come to mind. The first is something that we began close to, I want to say almost 10 years ago now, working with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. One of the things that Joseph mentioned when he was talking about online engagements is there isn't a face-to-face interaction, which means that sometimes people can behave in ways that they might not behave offline, or that they feel they are protected from that type of face-to-face engagement. We have tried to work with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence to try to build into our platform tools that help create empathy and community. So for example, we have something called social resolution tools on our platform. If, for instance, someone on Facebook post a photo of you that you don't like. Now, it may not be clear to us that they're doing it to bully you, and they may not even, in fact, be doing it to bully you, but they may be. If it's not clear to us, or you report it to us, you also can reach out to that individual directly, right in our reporting mechanism, to say, hey, I don't like that photo. That has proven to be very, very successful. When we first launched it, people were initially skittish about using it, and we couldn't understand why. And what we found is that sometimes it's very hard to reach out to a person and let them know that something may be bothering you. So we built in, working again with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, we built into that system easy prompts to make it very light and easy to do that. And we saw a big uptake in the use of those tools. And what's most amazing is that in the vast majority of cases, when someone reaches out to another person and says something about that post, the person will take it down. So they didn't necessarily understand the full impact on that individual. So humanizing that interaction can make a big difference. The other piece of that work was building a bullying prevention hub. Inside of this hub on our platform, parents, educators, as well as teens can find resources on how to start a conversation about bullying, either in their classroom, or if your child has been the victim of bullying, or if your child is being accused of bullying. How do you have a conversation with your child about that interaction? The second thing that I think we've found particularly successful, also again, speaks to the wisdom of Joseph, are peer-to-peer programs. So we launched last year in the UK a peer-to-peer program where we offer peer-to-peer digital ambassadors in every school, where we will go in and train these digital ambassadors to help create an anti-bullying environment within the school, which has impact on their online engagement as well. And those programs actually talk about online interactions. Those have been some of the most successful programs. We've done that in the UK, in India, and the United States, here in Miami. We find that they work very, very well.
Let me throw another question we're going to address as well. And I think it kind of relates to what Jen was talking about earlier in terms of good digital parenting. Are parents aware? And it's a question I have in terms of, do some parents, are parents understanding what is happening online? And how much of that is the tools that we've created, but also creating a situational awareness where they say, oh, here's what's happening.
Well, as a parent and a former middle school teacher, I can say sometimes they are, sometimes they're not even aware of their own behavior. So one of the things that I do think many of the platforms are doing, and I know we did almost a year ago, is to really sit down with parents, and we did roundtables around the world to understand what they're experiencing and how they're navigating as parents. And with that, we launched a parents portal on Facebook, which gives them some of the basics about how Facebook works, but also gives them a lot of information about managing these types of conversations with their children around online technologies and what is the kind of behavior that they want to see from their child. And just speaking very personally, there's a lot for parents to learn as well. I can give two very quick stories. One was teaching my daughter about navigating the time she spent online. And I remember when we first gave her her phone, seeing the glow of the phone from her room past when she was in bed, and having to say to her, you know what, we're going to have downtime. There's a time when it's important to put your phone down. And for instance, when you're in bed might be one of those times. And she turned to me and she said, but you don't. And so the importance of role modeling as a parent. So we set up a time at our house where the phones went down, we put them on the nightstand. There was downtime for us, time to interact, a time to shut off what might be occurring at school or anywhere else. The other thing was actually the way in which you speak to your child or interact with your child and communicate through these technologies. Oftentimes families are utilizing these devices to be able to stay connected, and that's really important and it's great. And especially for parents who may be working at different hours from when their children are home, that these devices can be very important. On the other hand, if you're typing in all caps and you're yelling at your child and you're behaving in a way that you might not do in person, and then you're getting that back from your child, there's an opportunity in there to stop and take a step back and really look at what those communications look like and have that type of positive interaction with them.
So the question again was one or two successes. Sorry, replicated our model.
And just to echo a bit of what Antigone was saying, so I want to talk a little bit about the collaboration as a success, but also the youth-driven initiatives. So Antigone mentioned this incredible research that came out of a collaboration between Facebook and Yale, and at FOSI, we were really impressed with what was found. It was just a fascinating look at how kids can interact and what different words and things can help them have this more positive experience online. So we actually brought Facebook over, convened an event in Europe at one point in time, and showcased what Yale and Facebook did. This inspired other companies in Europe to try their own initiatives like this. It led to Vodafone's Be Strong emojis, giving kids a way to speak via emoji to communicate empathy and support. So we've been really happy to see, and working with the other companies here, represented here and around the world, a real effort to collaborate and get together and think about how to solve these problems. They compete in terms of having users and having time spent online and everything else, but they're willing to work together and share what's working, what's not working, and really new ideas, and we want to continue to encourage that. But I think that's an area of success from when I first started in this space, where people weren't quite sure what to even do with safety issues on their platforms, to now showing some leadership and helping others. And also, as I was saying, youth-driven initiatives, and having Joseph here today to highlight that, we see a real focus on empowerment in schools, kindness. We're seeing groups like the Diana Award in the UK. I know Facebook and others work with them. Project Rocket in Australia. Here in the US, we've worked with a group called Think Before You Type. There's so many groups being started by young people, and I think they're in the best position to know what they're experiencing and how they can help one another. And so the more we in this room can work together to highlight those great things that they're doing and move towards a culture of kindness, I think that's going to go really far.
Also, one success that I wanted to highlight, I mentioned earlier, our Online Safety Roadshow. So it's a program that we, Google, developed a few years ago, and it's an in-person, in-school program. The school assembly is called, and we have an enthusiastic Googler that gets up there and goes through a presentation and walks through kind of 5 core fundamental lessons with being a digital leader and being smart online. And some of those are around like avoiding scams, protecting your information online, not oversharing. But one of those core lessons is how to be positive online and how to be an upstander even when others aren't. So really sort of emboldening and equipping people with how to take a stand even when others aren't, when they see bullying occurring. So this program is something that we've done, like I said, for several years. We've been in over 40 states, and tens of thousands of students have gone through the program now. But one thing that we saw, so actually FOSI did some research, and they found that when it comes to parents trusting someone to equip their students with, what they need in terms of the benefits of technology and staying away from some of the potential harms, they really look to educators and teachers to do that. But 82% of educators don't feel like they have the resources that they need to do digital leadership, digital literacy, and citizenship training in their classroom. So we sort of iterated a little bit on the Online Safety Roadshow, and we created a program called Be Internet Awesome. And it's kind of got a little bit of something for everybody, educators, students, and parents. So educators, we took this Online Safety Roadshow curriculum, these 5 lessons, we put them into lesson plans, and educators can actually go online, and it's a free download that they can use in their classrooms. Parents, since it's online, they can also access it as well. But on the Be Internet Awesome site for parents, we have a pledge there where parents can say, our family, we commit to being good digital leaders, and we have conversation packets there to also help families, start some of these conversations about, okay, here's how we're going to use our devices when we're in the house, here's how we're going to use apps and respect others. And then what's really fun is on the student side, we actually created a game
called Interland. So students can go on a quest to be internet awesome, and through all these modules they can, you know, one up cyberbullies and shut down phishers. And it's a really fun interactive game. It's been used, I think we have over 4 million users of the game now. So we really see a lot of power and success in sort of having a consistent message and sort of learning path with educators, parents, and students. We find that that sort of facilitates discussion and makes things, especially when it comes to teaching these new lessons to students, it certainly makes it a little bit stickier when they're hearing consistent themes from everyone, every adult in their life.
To echo what Coco said, education is so important. I wanted to highlight a few initiatives. We work with many NGOs and partners through our Twitter for Good program. One of those partners is I Can Help. They are a pretty new organization, but what they're doing is to gather students, to teach them and to give them tools on how to combat cyberbullying and to get them to take a pledge to be a part of the solution and to support those who are being cyberbullied. Another organization we work with is the Hollowback, and they have a group called the Heart Mob. And so if you are being cyberbullied, you can go to the Heart Mob, and what they'll do is they'll create a mob to come around and protect you and to give you support on the platform. And so that's another good case study of what works.
That's great. What keeps you up at night? I mean, with the ever-changing kind of landscape, what are the new issues that are emerging right now that all of you are kind of dealing with? A range of things that we've talked about, from resources for students and teachers, the tools you provide, the awareness perhaps around the tools and make sure people are utilizing them. But what's the next thing that's kind of coming up that you're working on and others should be focused on as well?
Well, I don't know if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, probably my daughter. But what I do think is something that I do think about quite a bit is how do we raise the voice of young people who are really utilizing these platforms in amazing ways. The thing that I don't want to see happen is that gets lost in this conversation, because it is actually probably the single most important thing to ensuring a positive community. So we do see, as Joseph mentioned, we do see quite a bit on Facebook. Teens who may be isolated for various reasons because they are unique or different in some way, finding and building communities and gathering strength in that way. We see people who do incredible things. I'll give an example of a story of a boy by the name of Daniel Quee in a location near to where we're headquartered in Menlo Park. He had been, he was a goalie for the soccer team for his school, and at a very critical game, he missed a goal, they lost the game, and unfortunately, a number of kids in the school started to post photos of various times when he had failed to block a goal. And some bullying began, and very quickly, his teammates all posted as their own profile photos his photo, and they started posting photos of him saving goals. And then the girls soccer team did the same thing. And after the girls soccer team, other students in the school started doing the same thing. So there's an extraordinary power in these technologies for building community, for building resiliency, for finding identity, for really promoting what's positive, and a lot for adults to learn actually from young people online. And that's the thing that I would like to see us really focus on moving forward, is how do we elevate those voices and those communities?
I think for me, it's, the concern around the awareness, making sure that parents know that there are resources to help them and to help their kids when they're encountering this. I think that's one thing that does keep us at Cozy up at night, and we're constantly trying to think about how else can we help empower parents. It's part of why we have our Good Digital Parenting Initiative. We've created this kind of framework of the 7 steps to good digital parenting, And the first one is to have a conversation with your kids. Well, depending on where you are, it's like, what does that conversation entail? How can we help parents facilitate these discussions and get the kids feeling confident, feeling empowered online, or knowing where to turn when something bad is happening? So we're constantly trying to figure out ways to reach parents and to build awareness of the tools and resources that are there. Because what worries me is if a child or parent doesn't know where to turn when something's happening. And there's a lot of good stuff that's going on online, so we want to make sure we can drive parents to these good resources, or drive children to, whether it's their teachers or their coach or someone else important in their lives, when they're going through something, we want to make sure they know where to turn. So I think the more we can all do to build awareness of tools and resources that can help, the better we can all do. And also making sure when there are new platforms or social media companies created, that they're taking this seriously. Because what you don't want is kids migrating to the hottest new app and encountering really negative things, and that there are no tools to kind of shut down the bullying or deal with the problems there. So I think those are just some of the challenges that we're all working on right now.
And where would you tell parents if a parent comes up to you at the break and says, where do I go?
Yeah, my colleague Erin is here with me today. We do a lot of parenting talks, and we drive them to our own resources through Good Digital Parenting, our blog, and the downloadable tools that we have. Our 7 steps are the #1 way for parents to start this conversation at home and work through, including, as Antigone was saying, being a good digital role model. And if it's a platform-specific issue, we do point them to the great resources that exist on Facebook, on Twitter, the reporting, the blogging. We point them to Google's resources as well. So if it's an individual question about a specific tool or app or platform, we try to point them there, but we also do have a great framework that can help and facilitate them learning a little bit. One of the other issues we do hear sometimes from parents at the breaks after a parenting talk especially is the challenge of when their own child might be the bully. And that's something I think we all in the room need to try to figure out other ways to deal with, and to help parents have those really difficult conversations and sometimes get to the underlying cause of why their child might be acting out or having problems with another child.
So I think, as you've heard today, I mean, there's a lot that the platforms are doing in terms of our own products and sort of things that we can do, a lot of programs that we're involved with. But I think one thing similar to what Antigone was saying, that we at YouTube especially are trying to think about, is how do we amplify influencer voices? Certainly parents and teachers are influential and educating their teens and young adults on these issues. But there are other voices that are out there that can be leveraged in this conversation. So on YouTube, there's a program that we've started to sort of get at this called Creators for Change. And so we partner with organizations around the world to really train them to create good content to combat hate online. And the content that's been created through this program now has over 60 million views on YouTube today. One other thing that we have a lot of YouTube creators in the room. I mean, I don't always know the latest and greatest, but all the teens do know which channels they're subscribing to. But we have a lot of creators that are sort of celebrities in their own right. And so for days like, say, for Internet Day this February, we try to galvanize some of those creators to create content around cyberbullying especially. So some of our young adult creators named Brooklyn and Bailey, they have about 5 million subscribers on their channel, something wild like that. And they created a video called Think Before You Post, and it got well over 1 million views on YouTube. So we're definitely trying to figure out how do we find what those influential voices are and how do we amplify them on our platforms.
To piggyback on what Coco said, we've found success in similar strategies, especially around the world. My colleague in India just did something called tweet surfing, which was where she leveraged influencers and celebrities to talk about this issue to help create and socialize this issue, so that way people are more aware of it and know what to do. So that's something that's certainly important. I think one thing too that we think a lot about is, how do we educate people on our rules, and how, when we do take action, how are we communicating what action we're taking and why, because we think that helps discourage future behavior. And we've actually found that that is the case. So that's something we think a lot about. We've changed some of our in-app reporting features over the last year, so that way if you do violate a term of service, you see exactly which tweet offended that rule and why, and so I think that makes a big difference too.
So I think we've had an opportunity to talk a little bit about how parents can get engaged, what resources. We talked about students in terms of what resources are available. Coco mentioned something earlier, though, regarding teachers and some data surrounding their understanding or ability to access resources that would be helpful to them. I know another issue is this my responsibility? This is occurring online. Did that occur on campus? Did it occur off campus? Those sorts of things. But I'm curious to hear from all of you. In what ways can teachers be more involved? And what all of you may be doing to kind of bring them into the fold?
First, I think it's important to note that raising children is really takes a whole community of people, whether it's educators, parents, grandparents, their peers. We all have an invested interest in giving them the social and emotional learning skills as well as the other skills that they need to navigate both the online and offline world. You mentioned educators specifically, and one of the things that we recently launched on Facebook is a digital literacy library. Specifically because teachers are being asked to take on more and more in terms of helping children navigate the world. And they don't often have necessarily the background or the skills for any particular areas. And so we worked with the Youth and Media Center at Harvard's Berkman Klein Center, Internet Center, and developed a number of lesson plans that teachers can easily take into their classroom, but also parents, after-school programs, homeschooling parents, that they can take and really work with the student. And these are tested, they're research-based. I think one of the things I would also like to emphasize with all of this work is the importance of research in this area, and not just creating loads and loads of programs that we throw at communities, but that they are research-based, that they're evaluated for their efficacy, so that we land in the right place.
Yeah, and I think we've been thrilled to be part of Google's Me Internet Awesome initiative and be able to go out and talk to teachers. And I think, as I was saying earlier, teens turn to all sorts of people in their lives, and sometimes not always their parents. It might be a coach, it might be a teacher. So making sure that teachers are aware of the resources that are out there, aware of what kids are doing online. We're really trying to create a culture of tech-savvy teachers who may not know the ins and outs of every app, but they might know what to do if a student in their classroom is being bullied or is acting differently or showing signs that something might be happening online. We want to make sure that the teachers also are working with the school and with the parents when they encounter this. So raising awareness for teachers, I think as Tiffany said, we're always advocates for more research and understanding what's working and what's not in this space. So I think if we could learn a little bit more about how some of the tools and resources for teachers and some of the curriculum that exists is working and what else we can do to tweak that, I think that would be really helpful as well.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Be Internet Awesome curriculum is online. It's free, downloadable. I think it's in 16 languages now for parents to access and teachers as well, and implement those lesson plans in their classroom. But one thing I would encourage, parents to think about, certainly there are so many resources that we have out there that they can leverage, but really it should start with the conversation in your family, in your home. Don't pretend bullying and cyberbullying may not be, happening in your child's universe. And I think through having those conversations, you can really start to think about, okay, what are the best things, the best resources that I need as a parent to equip me and my child to be digital leaders and be successful in creating a positive environment. So instead of, being overwhelmed by everything that's out there, really sort of chatting with your teen and figuring out, the best resources and what you need as a parent to be able to leverage.
I would just go ahead and retweet everything you just said.
Sounds good. So we have about 20 minutes remaining, and I definitely want to make sure we focus on partnerships. Not only in terms of what you're doing with outside entities, we heard about partners with Harvard and Yale, other nonprofit entities, but with our federal partners here. I think we're all eager to hear from you about not only the resources, encouraging upstanding behavior, working with parents, children, teachers, but broader, what are some other issues that are kind of on the horizon? What are ways in which all of you can be working together? I'm not sure if all of this is kind of individual work or in cooperation. So I'm eager to hear a little bit about that and also help facilitating kind of this portion too. But I want to start with Jen a little bit, just because you're kind of spearheading some of this work.
Yeah, well, we do. As I said, we're trying to build a culture of responsibility online, and that's all about partnerships. We have tech-savvy teachers, we have industry involved, we like to get law enforcement involved, parents, the kids themselves, other NGOs. Everyone has a role to play in making kids safe online and in combating cyberbullying online. So it's really important for events like this, events like FOSI convenes with our annual conference and roundtables and small workshops, to bring people together in a room and share what they're doing. We want to learn the latest research, the latest groups that are out there, the latest good things that young people are doing, so that we can amplify that, so that we can get that information out to schools and to parents and others. So I think it's really essential to convene people and to collaborate when it comes to this space. Another great example of partnerships, last year, I'm not sure if any of you in the room saw a fantastic public service announcement called In Real Life. And it used actors that had bad things happening to them, but normal people walking by encountered these bad things, and it was all about whether or not they stood up and whether or not they took action to help that person who was being victimized. I think it was a very powerful PSA, an example. I know there's some of you in the room who worked on that. That's something that gets out there to the public, it's educational, it's powerful as well. So I think the more of that we can create as a group, that would be fantastic to help educate and empower people. So that's just a few of the things that we really think can be helpful when it comes to partnerships. And also with all of these agencies represented here today, the government does have a role to play. You have fantastic platforms through social media, through your websites, and through the initiatives and programs that you all run. So working together to make sure that you're sharing similar or the same message, and that you're being effective in how you do that is really important.
Again, guys, that anti-bullying summit with Melania Trump happening just over the border of DC in Rockville, Maryland this morning. So some interesting stuff there to see. I know that kind of went on a little bit long, but staying in Maryland on that Maryland trend, I want to bring you over to the video that we have from the University of Maryland football team. This morning, the student athletes, announced how they're going to memorialize football player Jordan McNair, who was the 19-year-old who died on the practice field. He collapsed and then died 2 weeks later. We've been kind of talking about this for a while. I want to show you this, though. It's a quick couple of minutes, but it's students kind of reflecting on McNair's number, his jersey, what they're going to be doing to memorialize him. He would have graduated in 2020. So here's what they had to say this morning.
Since Jordan's passing, we have, as a football program, been grieving and mourning in our own way together. Our football players have spent a lot of time in trying to decide the best way to honor Jordan and his memory, and they're going to tell you about it today, and they're very proud to do that. We'll start with Ellis.
Good morning. Thank everybody for coming. We come here today as the University of Maryland football players to change the conversation. It's time to get back to what is important, and that is honoring our fallen friend, brother, and teammate, Jordan McNair. The moment that we stop saying his name, the moment that we begin to forget, his legacy will begin to fade. But we plan to have his legacy live on forever. We plan to never forget. This season, Jordan's spirit will be living within each and every one of us. Every play we make, every snap we take will be in Jordan's honor. As I said at the funeral, Jordan was fearless. He was a dreamer. He would do anything for his teammates. He fought till his very last breath for his teammates. And now we would like to honor him. So this season, every game we'll be wearing a helmet sticker with the number 79 on the back. This is the number that Jordan wore during his time here at Maryland. Also, during the Texas and the Temple games, we will hold a moment of silence in his honor. In addition, we will have one Maryland football student athlete every year will be bestowed with a scholarship in Jordan's honor.
Jordan was one of the best friends, teammates, and roommates that anyone could ever ask for. He was a gentle giant, and we as a team will continue to carry on his legacy through this season and far beyond. The offensive line room in the newly renovated Cole Fieldhouse will be named after Jordan. No member of the University of Maryland football team will wear the number 79 through his graduation year, and he will be honored on senior day with his class. Jordan's locker will be encased in glass in the Gossett football team house and will be moved to the Cole Fieldhouse when we move there permanently. To the fans, thank you for your unwavering support. We've really enjoyed that. It is now more than ever that we need your support. We have been working hard all summer and all training camp to make you proud in everything to do. We're all in this together. Thank you, and go Terps.
Again, short and sweet, a little honoring there of Jordan McNair, some of his teammates and fellow student athletes. But I want to take you over now, guys, to the White House. We have one live stream coming in from what looks to be the East Room of the White House, some sort of immigration panel, question and answer session. We'll get more information for you, but let's take you over to the White House. This is live here in Washington.
I've really been able to see these men every day focus in on the successes of our men and women every day who are working on ICE. And they're very humble public servants. And they literally put their heads down, get to work, and ensure that not only that our borders are secured, but as well as dealing with very broad issues, such as dealing with counter-narcotics, as well as dealing with the increasing gang situation that we have seen that has plagued so many of our communities. So with that, I first want to say thank you to both of you, as well as to those local law enforcement officials that we have joining us as well, and are partnering with our governors and our senators to ensure that we have a holistic approach in dealing with this issue of not only securing the border, but as well as enforcing our immigration laws and dealing with ways to prevent terrorism. And so to get started, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and we have a very strong group here with us today. Commissioner Kevin McAleenan joining us. Thank you so much for being here. He's our Commissioner for U.S. Customs Border Patrol Agents, and so again, want to say that we're really thrilled that you're here. He has actually served 3 presidents, so it's a wonderful opportunity for you to be here. With us as well is our Governor Doug Ducey from Arizona. He has been one to be very strong on talking about basically saying how critical when they've talked about abolishing ICE and how that's an incredibly reckless statement to be made. So again, thank you for joining us as well. Ron Vitello's here with us. He's our Deputy Director for ICE. We also have Sheriff Mark Donnells from Arizona, as well as our Senator from Georgia, Senator Perdue, and last but not least, our Attorney General from Alabama, Steve Marshall. And with that, we'd like to start just some general questions. I think, first of all, I think it's important to understand what our ICE and our CBP mission is. People always just assume that it's just immigration enforcement. As we know, it's much broader than that. And with that, I'd like, Kevin, if you can start to talk about what we're doing, what do you work on every day in terms of helping to ensure that we're protecting our homeland security, in particular when it comes to preventing terrorism?
Thanks, Mercy, and thanks for this opportunity to be here, to have some of our agents and officers who have had notable successes be honored here at the White House, and also have the families of our fallen agents. It's really much appreciated, that recognition and support for CBP. Thank you for asking that question about our counterterrorism mission. Counterterrorism is the primary mission of CBP. It's the reason we were created after 9/11, and we've built a tremendous capability at our National Targeting Center to support interagency efforts and international efforts to identify and prevent terrorists from moving across borders. We do that a number of times each day, even before they can enter the system to head to the United States if they apply for a visa or they try to enter through the visa waiver program. And so we're bringing together interagency data, advanced analytics, and partnerships to enhance that mission set. And with the support of the White House for the National Vetting Center, we're going to be able to take that to the next level and investing further in our systems, as well as bringing the data from the intelligence community into that process to get the best possible information we can to our men and women in the field to make good decisions on potential threats.
I think the Secretary has mentioned that CBP actually, they prevent the entry of about 10 known or suspected terrorists a day.
Usually that's very early in the cycle when they're applying for permission to travel to the U.S. foreign, and it is a core aspect of our mission.
Governor Ducey, you're right on the border. Walk us through what you're seeing in terms of terrorist threats as you're dealing with this issue on the border.
Well, thank you, Mercy. Thanks for having me. I want to say also to President Donald Trump and to Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen, it's our honor to be here and to give special spotlight to the men and women who are in CBP and ICE. These are men and women, American men and women on the front lines. And Arizona really has been the epicenter of so much of this. The drug cartels, the human trafficking, the child sex trafficking that has happened in our state. So we've gone out of our way to make sure that we shine a spotlight on law enforcement, that they not only have the support that's necessary, but when they're doing the things of interdicting the dangerous drugs, the illegal ammunition that is coming across the border, that they're getting credit for that. And I want to thank this administration because we have a partner now in the federal government and what we're trying to do back in the state of Arizona. And I think this idea, this cultural idea that we should be grateful and thanking all men and women in law enforcement, whether it be CBP or ICE, or we just recently lost a state trooper, 24-year-old state trooper who was also a veteran, was needlessly killed in the line of duty. So we've done a number of things in Arizona, like the Arizona Medal of Valor. This is for unusual heroism or bravery in the line of duty. And we've put together a border strike force, which is led by our Department of Public Safety in partnership with our county sheriffs. We've got County Sheriff Mark Daniels, who's here today. I see Sheriff Napier is here as well. These are the men that work with us at the state level. This administration has been working with us at the national level. We've been getting results not only in stopping gang members and dangerous drugs, but arresting criminals at the border and have a cooperative federal government in the pursuit.
Thank you. Ron, talk to us about the Counterterrorism Task Force and what ICE is doing to help ensure that we're preventing terrorism.
Thank you for that, and thanks for this opportunity. It's wonderful to be in a place like this, and I'm so grateful to be able to share this moment with some good friends and people I care a lot about. ICE was created in the aftermath of 9/11 to prevent the lessons learned in that event. And so one of the single biggest investments that ICE makes in the interagency in the fight against terrorism is with the JTTF. Our partners, CBP does this the department does this along with us, but CBP and ICE are probably the two biggest contributors to the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And you've heard the open source media about how the FBI is almost overwhelmed with the number of cases that they see across the country where they're tracking down people who are determined to be a threat to this country, but there are no other ways for, there are no actual charges to remove them from the country or to take them into custody for the threat of terrorism. So these task forces, they roll on all of these cases. They help the FBI do their surveillance. And then when cases are made, we help with the investigations using our specific investigative authorities as it relates to border search, as it relates to expertise in HSI on the dark web to see how these people communicate. And they think they're communicating in a surreptitious way, but we have people in our organization that can look at those communications and use that information. And at the end all be all, if we can't make a case against somebody who's a suspected terrorist, but they're in the country on a visa or they've lied to obtain their immigration benefits in the United States, then we have the enforcement removal operation, which can get these folks out of the country.
Just want to jump to Senator Perdue. Obviously, you oversee much of the work of CBP and ICE. You represent, obviously, in the state of Georgia, one of the busiest airports in the world. Tell us, what do you make of the work that ICE and CBP do every day in terms of ensuring that we're preventing terrorism?
Well, it's like anybody else up here. If you do your job, nobody notices. But the first time you make a mistake, we all notice, right? Atlanta Airport is a great blessing for us in our infrastructure in Georgia, and it's a great asset for our country. But First of all, I want to thank President Trump and Secretary Nielsen for setting today up. The men and women of ICE and of CBP have had a pretty rough road the last month or 6 weeks, and I think this is totally appropriate. It's a high privilege for me to be a part of this, Mercedes, so I just want everybody to know in those two organizations how highly thought of they are by most people in the American Senate, U.S. Senate. I think what we have right now is an asset that we take for granted. When President Trump was elected, national security was an issue. The world is more dangerous right now than any time in my lifetime, and the President made this a #1 focus. You know, there are only 6 reasons why 13 colonies got together in the first place, and one of those was to provide for the national defense. And if you have open borders, how can you assure that you're going to have national defense? So President Trump has called this a top priority. And what we have to do to protect our airports and our ports, you know, I saw a statistic the other day in preparing for this. I mean, CBP has 1 million opportunities today to fail us. 1 million people a day cross our borders, and they have to reach out and make sure they're upholding our national security. And 90% of the people sought after and detained by ICE every year are convicted criminals. And this is not like we're finding innocent people out there that are not intending to do us harm. These people put their lives in jeopardy every day. And I'm delighted to be a senator from the home state with the airport that we have, but I have to tell you, it's bigger than that. It's every port, it's every airport. 600,000 people come into our country every year by land. And that kind of tells you the perspective. If 1 million are coming in, so 2/3 of them are coming in by land. So I'm very delighted to be here, and I want the men and women of ICE and CBP to understand how highly they're cherished by most of us.
Thank you. I think one of the greatest threats that CBP is facing and ICE is facing, as well as local law enforcement, is the threat of MS-13 gang members, obviously plaguing so many communities, including those where there's a lot of Hispanics, a lot of minorities as well. And so I'd like to ask you, Sheriff, to talk us through what you have seen in your state when it comes to having to deal with these MS-13 gang members and the impact it's having on community safety.
Well, thank you. First of all, on behalf of over 3,000 sheriffs in this country, it's a true honor to be sitting here. You know, I look back at my 34 years working border communities, and this is the first time I've seen my fellow sheriffs out here today in the audience, Sheriff Napier, Sheriff Lamb from my home state, that we're united. And the only way we're going to solve this is when we have leaders like President Trump, Secretary Nielsen, Governor Ducey from my state, thank you, and you all sitting here today in a unified force, unified message that is all about community and public safety. And that's what this is about today. This is what we need to go. I can look back after 34 years and say it's not been that way in the past. And I can say today to have that support from President Trump, this is not a political, policing doesn't have politics involved. We police for people. So having that today is just an honor to be sitting here in front of you all to speak. In my 34 years, we've seen some serious violent actions on our border. We talk about open borders. I'm 100% opposed to that, and the fact that you look at the folks in this front row, God bless you all for your strength, your courage to be here today. I've seen citizens in my county that have changed the way they live because of gang members coming across our border, breaking in their homes where they're afraid to leave them. Citizens killed in my county. I'll give you an example, a recent example where we had a 60-year-old female that was working for our National Park Service that was cleaning bathrooms at one of our parks, unarmed, getting some supplies out of the back of her truck. A smuggler who just dropped a load off that had served time in 2 of our state prisons under different aliases, left his group from going back south, took a rock and bashed her head in. Left her for dead after he beat her a second time in the bathroom after he drug her there. Stole her car, went down to our local border community, got a fast food, and went across the border. To be picked up 24 hours later, coming back across the border by our Border Patrol heroes. We ended up arresting him 6 months later with a DNA match. He's in prison for 76 years. One thing I'll say about this is anybody that thinks that criminal transnational organizations that come across this border are good for communities is 100% wrong. Come live in our communities. Come see what we're doing. I believe in a multi-badge, unified message, one-mission approach. And the gangs, it's no secret, you see it up in the East Coast. Some of the sheriffs here from the East Coast are coming to your communities, they're coming to our communities. We need to stand united and collaborate at all levels to make that true difference. Thank you.
Attorney General, We just saw Philadelphia, the mayor, celebrate the status of being a sanctuary city. What message is that sending out to the rest, to constituents, and as well as to other communities across the country?
Marcy, thank you, and thank you very much for the privilege of being able to be here today. First of all, I'm grateful for an administration that's willing to look at the law enforcement that's here to be able to say thank you, because you don't hear that very often. Many times law enforcement bands together in tragedy, but you don't necessarily have people come up and to be able to say thank you. And as somebody who is a chief law enforcement officer of a state in which a 13-year-old girl with autism was beheaded as a result of the cartel wanting to make a statement through somebody that was here illegally, or a woman who was killed in a car accident with a person that was here twice deported and then ran from law enforcement when they left, or a young child that was recently molested as a result of somebody who crossed the border illegally, you need to know that those stories would be far more frequent were you not doing your job and doing it well, and so very grateful for that. The sanctuary cities issue is critical for us. General Wilson is here. He and I and others have stood for this idea that the rule of law matters in this country, that to the extent that Congress sets policy, that we have an obligation to be able to enforce that law fairly and impartially. And to the extent that cities say that we're going to avoid the law, that we're going to ignore valid warrants, that we're not going to allow for law enforcement to be able to do their jobs, then what we've done is to be able to create safe havens for those who would do things criminally to know that they've got a place where they can do it without law enforcement becoming engaged. And we don't believe that's right. And so that we will stand together as attorney generals across the country that believe very strongly in this issue to be able to say not only do we support this administration in saying we should be able to withhold funds from those cities who want to say they want to avoid their obligation, both under state and federal law, but that we're going to band together to be able to say that those cities are making the rest of us unsafe. And so grateful for the fact that this administration recognizes that issue, that we've seen both the Department of Justice as well as the executive branch through President Trump to be able to say that won't be tolerated. The good thing is we get to stand with you. And I'm grateful for General Wilson and what his leadership for us with the Republican AGs and others that are wanting to stand together to say that the rule of law is important in this country, that it is really that line between order and chaos. And we're going to continue to do our job to make sure that we enforce it fairly.
Commissioner, walk us through, when it comes to this mentality of MS-13, the dangers they're imposing as they're crossing through the border. What are the men and women of CBP seeing on the border, and specifically when it comes to criminal activity and MS-13 gang members?
Sure. There's been a lot of focus on people crossing the border that don't present an obvious threat or concern. But really, alongside that is a hardened group of smuggling organizations, transnational criminal organizations that are violating our laws by bringing people and contraband across that border. They're violent. As you just heard from the sheriff, there's individual examples across the country of communities that are facing challenges based on this flow coming through. So our agents are out there on their own, often with state and local partners trying to address this challenge, and they're confronting it every day, and they're doing a tremendous job with it.
And Ron, I want to ask you this similar question in terms of MS-13 gang members, what your agents are dealing with when in terms of confronting this issue in these communities and what impact we're having.
Thank you. There's not a day that goes by that we don't encounter at least a few MS-13, whether turned over by CBP and illegally crossing the border or attempting to enter. Our own investigations culminating in the arrests or removal operations where we're bringing people back to El Salvador. This is a ruthless gang that is coming to this country only to ply their trade, to sell drugs on the retail market, and they enforce their code of conduct, if you will, whatever you want to call it, but they're a ruthless group. You all have seen the headlines of what they do to people, and so there are many men and women in ICE, CBP, the department, our partners represented here, who are dedicated to making sure that they are not in the country any second longer than they need to be. It'll be the work of ICE and the department to make sure that we give our men and women on the front line the tools to combat this vicious organization.
Senator Perdue, obviously, we're yearning for Congress to take action on these issues. So what policy options do we have to get cities who protect these criminal aliens to cooperate with federal law enforcement?
Well, we have to break through the gridlock. First of all, that's how President Trump got elected. He talked about this as not just a national security issue, it's an immigration issue, but there's a large growing connection between terrorism and the drug trafficking that we see in our country. Half of the people in prison, in federal prison today, are international drug traffickers. And so what we've got to do is break through the gridlock. We've had bill after bill in the last year and a half since President Trump was elected that would move toward the solution of this. Sanctuary city would be addressed. Kate's Law would have addressed a problem. Merit-based immigration would help dramatically. President Trump actually offered a pathway to citizenship for some 1.8 million DACA recipients that would have pushed the debate far, far toward an ultimate solution. So I believe that what we've got to do is to take the politics out of this and recognize the severe dimension of national security that's at risk here. Unfortunately, we've got two parties up here, and the minority party right now, this is a historic level of obstructionism. Some 331, I think last count, nominees waiting to be confirmed. We're now struggling to get the government funded by September 30. That's why I'm here today, is that the Senate is in session in the month of August trying to get this done. So we'll see if between now and November, with an election coming up, if we can break through to actually get some bipartisan bills done. There's hope. The Dodd-Frank bill that was passed early this year was a bipartisan effort that will help small-town banks. And I believe the same level of bipartisanship is absolutely needed to get legislation done to solve some of these problems for these men and women who put their lives on the line every day.
Thank you. So we've talked about preventing terrorism. We've talked about the gang and MS-13 scenario as well, the criminal aliens. One other issue, as we can tell, is the mission is so broad, it comes into the counter-narcotics. So, Commissioner, can you walk us through what a counter-drug mission looks like at CBP?
Sure. Well, we've all seen the crisis in our communities, the opioid crisis, but also in many states, the methamphetamine crisis. We've seen huge increases in our seizures on the border. Three vectors. Through our ports of entry, our lawful crossings, hidden among the hundreds of millions of vehicles that come across every year. In the express consignment, the FedEx and UPS, as well as the international mail, coming direct among these e-commerce shipments. We're all buying online, and those packages have grown by fivefold in 5 years. 600 million packages a year with very small shipments of narcotics. And then third, we've seen an increase in narcotics coming between our ports of entry, 25% last year being interdicted by the Border Patrol. So the numbers are pretty staggering. 70,000 pounds of meth already this year. We had 30,000 pounds in 2015. So we know the impact that's taking on our communities. We need to do better to interdict those drugs. And the investments that the administration and the Congress are making in non-intrusive inspection technology, this allows us to put cars through x-rays and find very small shipments that are hidden in axles and quarter panels and spare tires, training our canines to detect fentanyl and other analogs, and working with the Postal Service to get better information on all those packages coming from China so that we can identify and target high-risk shipments that could have fentanyl or other drugs in it. We're attacking that across the federal government with HSI, but also with our state and local partners. Every time they make a drug seizure locally in Cochise County, for instance, we want to know how that got there because we want to be able to take action to prevent it the next time.
Governor Ducey, what are you seeing in terms of the counter-narcotics, in terms of the issues of drugs crossing the border? What impact is it having on your state?
Well, as a border governor in a border state, these are things we deal with every day, and we've long seen it as public safety. And to hear the president talk about it as border security being national security is something that has broad support in the state of Arizona, and I believe even when you get out of the state of Arizona. When this is not a partisan issue inside our state. So when we talk about stopping methamphetamine, and we all know about the opioid addiction epidemic that we have inside our country, and we've lost over 900 Arizonans to that in the last year. But that has also brought a spike in heroin, and it has brought a spike in fentanyl and synthetic drugs. There's much of what's going on in Arizona that I'm proud of. I'm not proud that these dangerous drugs are coming across the southern border, not only to be distributed in the state of Arizona, but across the country. And I think so much of this talk of abolishing ICE or of talking about these brave men and women in our federal agencies or in law enforcement that wear a badge deserve our gratitude and support. We talked about a surge of badges to the border. That was when we deployed the National Guard, and that's happened in New Mexico, Texas, and California as well. There has been a spike in us actually interdicting dangerous drugs at the port because the border agents can be forward-facing and on offense rather than on defense. So we're hoping to see those numbers go in the right direction, but this is something that should concern every local law enforcement person and every citizen across the country.
Thank you. Ron, can you walk us through the counter-drug mission in terms of what it looks like in the interior? Obviously, Kevin addressed the border. From a border perspective, what does it look like from the interior?
So ICE, the Homeland Security Investigations group inside of ICE is dedicated to longer-term investigations to attack these cartels, how they're financed, how their business models work, where they're resident overseas, what kind of things they bring to the country. And so they use these investigative skills in undercover operations, wiretaps, if you will, Title III investigations, working as part of task forces in state, local, and other federal departments, but also maintaining task forces in the border environment as well as the interior, and using our specific skill set to work inside the dark web to see how these folks are communicating with each other and how they're importing things. The commissioner mentioned this cross-border traffic, like trying to figure out when these seizures are made, how we can contribute, how these investigations can be led and fed by something that may occur in the interior, but then we can trace it back to its origin. We also have a significant footprint overseas, having attaché offices that can work with local governments to vet and employ task forces in the overseas environment to understand the criminal networks as they exist overseas.
I just wanted to jump in and thank Governor Ducey on the National Guard support. Over 450 Arizona National Guard members helping us every day on the border, 1,600 border-wide. We've made 15,000 arrests with National Guard support, 14,000 pounds of narcotics seized, and you've put hundreds of agents back on the line. So I just wanted to thank you personally for that tremendous support and for the administration support in letting us mount that operation.
Thank you. Arizona's honored to do it, and there have been many other governors across the country that have called into us and the other border governors and offered their support as well. Like I said, not a partisan issue, a public safety issue, a issue of border security.
Including Alabama.
Well, we are facing a crisis in terms of the drug trade. And Sheriff, what is your experience in working with CBP and working with the federal officials to ensure that you're tackling this drug trade in Arizona?
Well, after 3 decades of watching the border evolve from the good, the bad, and the ugly again, it's nice to finally see that, and this is going to be a success story when it comes to what's going on the border. And that's based on our collaborative trust with our governor, with our local law enforcement, fellow sheriffs, our troopers in Arizona, and our federal partners all throughout. We have stood up a task force down there, supported by our governor, supported by the National Guard. We have 10 National Guard folks assigned to the sheriff's office on the border. We get about 4,000 picks a week in my county alone. Not all drug related, but there's a percentage that is. We have made a huge difference in Cochise County. I think it needs to be heard today and talked about. We have 100% conviction rate if you're smuggling in Cochise County. On our virtual camera system alone, which is over 300 deployed within Cochise County, to add on and complement what the federal government's already done, we have a 68.9% apprehension rate. So if we see you, there's almost 70% chance we're going to get you. And then what the federal government chooses or can't prosecute, we prosecute them. So that's a partnership that works. It's a partnership that's working not just for Cochise County, not just for the state of Arizona, but for all you sitting in the room, because there's not a sheriff or police chief that's sitting in this room that doesn't have a drug epidemic going on. And I have to say this too, on this one question about sanctuary cities that our Attorney General spoke about. When these, and I'm going to be kind of blunt and probably spoke about it later in media, these failed leaders from state and local communities that say, it's okay to come to my community and break the law. The Constitution is the backbone of what we do in this country. And to tell them to get through that front border, that front line, you're endangering the brave men and women from local, state, and federal law enforcement, because they'll do whatever it takes to get through our front efforts to get to these sanctuary cities. Shame on these leaders that are doing that. And thank you to a president, Secretary Nielsen, and all the other, this administration, and all the sheriffs and police chiefs out there saying, this is wrong.
Thank you. Senator David Perdue, what, in your mind, when you hear these critics basically talk about abolishing ICE, I mean, what message do you want to send to them?
Well, I just don't know how to respond to that. I mean, this is the United States of America. That's like saying, I want to get rid of the Marines. I mean, I can't relate to that. That somebody in an elected position would actually voice that as an intellectual position. I mean, I just don't understand. If anybody's read the Constitution, it's very plain about what our responsibility is. That's provide for national defense, and that means security at the border. And I'd like to go back to what the sheriff just said and what we've seen happen in Alabama. I mean, I think the cases that this Attorney General's brought are fantastic in terms of standing up for the Constitution. But, you know, I met Kate Steinley's father a couple years ago. And when you see a senseless murder like that, that could have been prevented, and any one of you in uniform can give us dozens of examples like that. When are we going to talk about the victims of this senseless crime and the victims of this drug commerce that's being perpetrated on the United States? I mean, this is when somebody, I think, fails their oath of office when they say they want to get rid of ICE or the CBP. I mean, I just think it's unconscionable, and frankly, I think it's downright unpatriotic and treasonous.
Attorney General, I'd like to ask you the same question. In terms of these critics who are calling out their abolish ICE, what are your thoughts on that?
Can I just say amen to what the senator just said? No, I think it speaks volumes to somebody's perception of what it is that these fine men and women do. You know, we've talked a little bit about the front end side of the law enforcement where many tons have been stopped at the border. But what you also don't see is what happens on the back end. Is that I'm in a prosecutor for 20 years, and at one point in time I did some statistics for us. I was in an area in Alabama known as Meth Mountain. By the way, not a great moniker that you want, but yet over 70% of our drug traffickers were in this country illegally, 70%, which meant that when they were arrested, local law enforcement had the opportunity to contact ICE for a detainer to make sure that those individuals were going to stay until we had the opportunity for them to be sent to trial. The other thing that it gave us the opportunity to do is to work with additional federal partners to see whether or not those individuals could be prosecuted federally rather than the state level. One of the things that you hear from federal prosecutors, they typically don't have the opportunity to issue a complaint, that their process takes a little bit longer. And by the use of ICE's authority for a detainer, through the work of local law enforcement, many times we were able to capture those bad apples that were the worst of the worst for us to make sure that not only did we have the chance to fully prosecute them, but also prosecute them in the venue in which we were going to make the most difference. And so those that would criticize ICE, those that would believe that we want to be able to abolish one of the most effective law enforcement mechanisms that I know out there, clearly don't understand what you do and don't have an appreciation, as the sheriff talked about, the danger that you've placed yourself in so that I and others could be safe, and we're grateful for that.
Thank you. I want to move on to securing the border. Obviously, for President Trump, this is a top priority in ensuring that we're able to have border security and protecting our homeland as well. Commissioner, I want to start with you. Obviously, you're seeing the everyday challenges at the border. Give us your insight as to what the men and women are facing at the border when it comes to dealing with border security.
Sure. Yeah, we've had a chance to talk a little bit about the flows between ports of entry illegally, the narcotics flows. We also have on that southwest border, as I think the senator alluded to, over 500,000 lawful travelers a day, as well as $2 billion in commerce. So we've got to try to facilitate all of that important commerce between the U.S. and Mexico and really abroad while enforcing it's about 600 laws for 47 different agencies. So that's a huge challenge for us. But really what's marked the last decade or so is the transnational criminal organizations, it used to be called drug cartels, growing in strength and power and diversifying. They used to just focus on moving narcotics, really marijuana, some cocaine as their cash products. Now with the production of heroin in Mexico, with synthetic opioids coming from China being pressed into pills and coming across, and then capitalizing on the movement of vulnerable people. And our legal framework invites some of the most vulnerable people in our hemisphere to put themselves in the hands of these violent criminal organizations because they think they're going to be successful in coming into the country and staying. And that's an extremely dangerous dynamic. To have violent folks with vulnerable people at the same time as the drugs are coming across. And that's what our agents and officers confront every day. So it's a really challenging mix. What we're trying to do is apply the best set of resources we can against it. We've got tremendous support for investing in additional wall, investing in technology, investing in technology for the ports of entry to be able to put more vehicles through systems where we can identify threats, and also our most valuable resource, our men and women. We're hiring additional officers and Border Patrol agents, trying to find some of the top mission-inspired people in the world when we've got very low unemployment to join us, because it's really an outstanding career. So that support for all of our investments across the board is what we're going to need to continue to enhance security alongside our international and very much our federal, state, and local partnerships.
So you talked about the wall. What impact would it have to build the walls? And I know we're recently building the wall along the southern border, but what would the impact of the wall be on border security?
Yeah, we've submitted a comprehensive plan to Congress called the Border Security Improvement Plan, and one of the key elements of that is additional wall system which can impede and deny access to criminal elements for crossing key areas of our border. You think about an area of our border where we have a dense population environment on both sides of the border. We only have a very short window of time to try to interdict someone who's crossing illegally or bringing a drug load across. If we can bolster our barriers, and this includes replacing very old scrap metal barriers with modern wall system, with cameras, with sensors, we're going to be in a much better position. And we're already seeing that. We have 4 active construction zones across the border in El Centro, in San Diego, in El Paso, and that's already demonstrating a difference. It's moving the traffic away from areas where we have a short vanishing time to areas where we have a better tactical advantage. And that's going to continue with the investments in the FY18 bill from Congress, and then hopefully in fiscal year 19 we'll continue to see positive support. So really, it's making an impact already.
Thank you. Governor Ducey, Secretary Nielsen announced the deployment of the National Guard. What successes have you seen so far in Arizona, and also what challenges have you experienced?
So the majority of successes that we've seen with the National Guard to the border has been the advancement of additional personnel. And I would say that the best news has been the interdiction of illegal drugs, or interdiction of illegal drugs that we've seen at our ports of entry, which is where the majority of these dangerous products come over. But I was just in Cochise County last week with rancher Warner Glenn Kimbrough and his granddaughter Mackenzie. They've been ranching that land for 6 generations. They, along with John Ladd and Scott Arena and Sue Krentz, are very grateful to the administration for what they have seen as what they described as a Trump bump in terms of reduction of illegal activity since 2016. We know there was a surge in February and March of this year, and Secretary Nielsen acted with the National Guard being deployed down there. I know there was an outcry about this, but I don't think people should have been surprised. This has been done in previous administrations. It's just been done later in previous administrations. And the other thing I would say that I hear from the ranchers in the border counties, that this thought of abolishing ICE would be reckless, it would be wrong, it would be irresponsible, and it would be a threat to the state of Arizona.
Thank you. Ron, we've seen a web of these court orders, broken policies basically dictating our current immigration system. Which policy do you believe is hindering the ability to secure our borders and keep America safe?
Well, we've already talked at length about the sanctuary cities thing, and it's our opinion that there should be no jurisdiction in the United States that refuses the command of federal law to take people who are in the country who have crossed the border illegally and committed other crimes to come into custody of ICE. That those detainers wouldn't be honored. It's just not the way we should be doing business in the United States. It's against the interest of public safety in those communities, and it drives more traffic to the border. What we do on the border, and what we do worldwide, is we react to the arrests that CBP makes. And we have to take into custody all the people that they arrest that come into the country illegally. The system has to work. So when we're talking about loopholes and we're talking about changes, we need to have a system in this country that allows for people to have their due process rights when they're arrested, but then they eventually get to be removed from the United States if in fact they don't have a right to be here. Right now that system is not working for us. If you come to the border as a member of a family, you're released into the society, and you're set up for a due process right, and you're under DACA control. You're essentially waiting for a court date that may, in some cases, in a city like Phoenix, may be years away before you can have that due process right. We have to shore up the system so that when people come here illegally, they have a right to their due process, but then are eventually removed from the country. If we could get one thing, there's not just one thing. You got to do all the things that we talked about to shore up this system, but that would make a huge difference for all of us.
So talking about these loopholes, Senator Perdue, obviously the key is wanting to work with Congress to make sure that we're able to get this significant immigration reform, close these loopholes that we need for Department of Homeland Security. where do you see this playing out in Congress in the next few months?
Well, let me talk about the immigration part of that. You know, you've got security as one issue, you've got the immigration issues another. And 3 times in the last 11 years, Congress has tried and failed. These are well-meaning women and men trying to solve this issue and have failed because they've tried to take a comprehensive approach. President Trump comes into office and said, let's break this into the legal problem, the temporary work visa problem, and the illegal problem. And so he actually helped put a bill out that we thought would have gone a long way to solve that on the legal side. That was the Secure Act. And honestly, we bring in 1.1 million green card recipients a year. Now, only 70,000 of those are directly related to work. 70,000 is the immediate family, that's the wife and a spouse and children. And about 150,000 are asylum and refugee seekers. And that leaves 800,000 people that are coming to the United States legally every year that are linked to past recipients of worker green cards. 800,000. Now, nobody knows, I don't, and nobody in Congress knows what that level should be, but somebody should undertake an attempt to determine what that is from the standpoint of how many STEM workers we need and so forth, and let's work toward a merit-based immigration system that the President started talking about last year, and like most countries have already moved toward in some degree. The temporary work visa is a big problem. If you're going to grow the economy 3 and 3.5% like we're doing right now, you've got to deal with this. And then the illegal problem has got to be dealt with for all the reasons we said today. I think the Senate right now is developing an appetite, if we can get past this election, to actually finally break this into its components and get a bipartisan solution once and for all on this immigration side that will help these guys dramatically.
So is the president going to get his border wall?
I think he is. I think it's in DHS bill this year. You know, this is not a debate between 0 and 25 billion, which is where it's been over the last year. It's really between 2 billion and 5 billion, which is a very reasonable accommodation by President Trump in my mind. So I'm very hopeful when we get the DHS bill here in a few weeks, and that's why we're here in August, to try to get these bills done. We're going to have defense and HHS next week, which is by far the largest dollar amount of what we're doing. And then right after that, we'll do DHS, and that's where the debate will be. I'm optimistic we'll get it done for you.
Sheriff, talk through about why border security is so important in Arizona.
Well, number one, border security is very important for every community that we represent in this room today. It's all about public safety, that quality of life that we strive for as sheriffs, police chiefs, and those that wear the badge. It's truly what it's all about, is having that peace of mind. And let's not forget the fact that the United States Constitution says we need to have a secure border. I think that's something that we overlook in many conversations. It's so true. You know, watching this evolution of the border, one thing I can say is this administration, this president, and the many leaders in this room would agree is the fact is we have the will. That's something that's been lacking for many, many years. A lot of rhetoric talk, yeah, we're going to secure the border. We can go back in time and see that. Yeah, we're going to secure the border. We're going to secure the border. It's the best it's ever been. And the reason it's best, it starts with the President of the United States. It starts with a president that shares a mission supported by the Constitution to share that border. I also want to add a program by the federal government that supports local law enforcement called Stone Garden. Stone Garden is a program that's filtered from our federal partners to sheriffs on the border, our 31 border sheriffs on the southern border. That money also goes to our east coast, our northern border, so it's throughout the country on our national borders. But I'm speaking on the southern border. That money is allocated to local law enforcement. In my county alone, last year we had 7,000 traffic stops, tons of marijuana seized, other synthetic drugs, meth, you name it, 700 arrests. These are all based on the fact of funding that went to local law enforcement that normally we wouldn't be able to do. So again, this is the best it's been. I don't know how else I can say that. And the reason is, whenever you see something that's working or not working, look at the leader first. In this case, I can say it's working because we have people in the right positions throughout local, state, and federal government, to include our president.
Ron, can you address the visa overstay situation? As we know, I think Senator Perdue, in talking about the fact that we do have those individuals crossing through the border, but a lot of those individuals who just end up staying in the United States.
So we've worked a lot in the last couple of years with our partners in CBP, the State Department, to understand the number of people who come into the country, and then CBP has got a robust program. I'll let the commissioner talk about the exit, verifying people's exit, so when they do get permission to come from the government into the United States that we can actually verify that they've departed. But this is a big problem in the sense of, on the interior side as it relates to ICE's duties and interior enforcement, is that if you overstay your visa and you're found in the United States, you can be deported, but it's not a federal crime like crossing the border. And so that's among the reforms that we've been urging Congress to adopt. The 9/11 Commission told the government, told all of us, that they wanted an immigration system that had integrity, so that people got permission to come in, and when they left, we knew about it. And so that's part and parcel of what, it's one of those loopholes we'd like to see closed.
And Commissioner, in terms of if we want Congress to pass legislation tomorrow, what are the fixes we want to see? I know they always talk about the floors, they go through all the different components. Can you explain a little bit of what we want to be seeing in terms of legislation?
Sure, and if I could just really quickly comment on the overstay and entry exit, I think it's actually a positive story of progression. Overstays are down 10% in our report this year from the prior year. I think that's a testament to good visa issuance by our friends at the Department of State. CBP is able to now count every visa category, who's in and who's leaving the country, and the air and sea environment getting better in land. And we're implementing biometric processes to bolster this. So I think that's a tightening of our security through the ports of entry with overstays in partnership with ICE and state, and it's probably something we should pause and highlight. For us, in terms of the border security draw, the issues that affect us at the border the most are just what Director Vitello highlighted: the ability to have due process, transparent, efficient process for those who are trying to seek protection and access to the country, but being able to remove those who don't have the right to stay in the U.S. And that applies to family units, that applies to unaccompanied children, and that applies to asylum seekers. The system works fairly well for people trying to come into the country who we able to apprehend in terms of single adults. What it's not working for is these other three groups. So from a border security perspective, we could work with Congress to close those loopholes in our legal framework, keep people out of the hands of dangerous criminal organizations. We'd be in a much better position. Then we could focus on the drug smugglers and the actual risk crossing our border.
Governor, what actions can we see the state and local governments do as well to deal with improving the immigration system?
Well, in addition to being supportive of the border wall, or if you want to call it a physical barrier, in the state of Arizona, 2/3 of our border today already has a physical barrier up there. And when you talk to the ranchers, sometimes they'll talk about the Normandy fencing or the post and rail fencing, whatever you need to stop, but you also need surveillance on that wall. It's a technological wall, if you would, and that can be through satellites and, of course, border agents on the ground or new technologies that are there. This is something that has widespread support with our border agents, and I think to separate, like Senator Perdue did, to separate these issues out, to talk about border security, to talk about immigration, to talk about public safety. And one thing we've talked about in Arizona, because this is our neighbor, is the relationship that we have with Mexico. This is our largest trading partner ×4, and we have a very good relationship with the governor of Sonora, Claudia Pavlovich. We've had multiple visits to Mexico City and vice versa. So we build the relationship through trade and trucking and transit and tourism. But when it comes to public safety and law enforcement, we're talking about drug cartels and human traffickers, and that is going to be dealt with differently. That's how I'd like to see our Congress attack this, rather than trying to put it all together, because I think if you start with the idea of border security, this is something that has broad support across Arizona, and I believe across the country. It's not a partisan issue.
Thank you. Attorney General, give us your perspective in terms of what actions the state and local governments can do. I know you've been involved in a lawsuit in terms of sanctuary cities. If you want to give us some insight on that.
I think one of the words that you've heard, I think every speaker talk about, is cooperation. I can tell you that I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen a greater collaborative effort between our federal partners, state and local officials than we see right now, and we're seeing a difference in that. You know, one of the things that obviously that we've dealt with historically in law enforcement is that sometimes we live in silos, that we don't share information effectively, we don't always work cooperatively in a way that matters. I don't think that's the case now, and I attribute a lot of that to the fact that this administration has enabled and empowered federal law enforcement to work with us. It's not as if there wasn't a desire in the past, but I think that we are now doing it more effectively. And it's not just in dealing with those who cross the border illegally. It's also what I would sort of describe as illegal e-commerce or commerce when we're talking about human bodies for trafficking, as well as what we're seeing in illegal drugs. You know, when I think about the fact that this weekend I was in a larger city in North Alabama with over 1,000 people talking about ending the plague of heroin, what that group doesn't recognize is it would be worse if it wasn't for many of the people in this room and the leadership that is on this stage right now. Is it through the efforts of ICE and through those that are patrolling our borders, we are stopping fentanyl, we're stopping heroin coming across, so that when we talk about the loss of life in this country, although it's a staggering number that we've got to deal with more effectively, it would be worse but for what's going on now. And so I think that number one, what we're doing right now is being more effective, but yet we continue to have to be able to push that ball forward. And then what we hope is from this administration, through our partners in Congress, that we find something legislatively to deal with what we're seeing with sanctuary cities. The sheriff, I think, said it remarkably well. The Constitution matters. And for those of us who work on the law enforcement side, we embrace that fact. In fact, it's what we've pledged to be able to uphold. When we have public officials and those who refuse to abide by their constitutional duty, then it's something we have to do something about. We have the ability to be able to do some positive things through our legislation and through particularly our litigation, but yet I think we're looking to Congress as well as the Department of Justice to be able to help us there as well.
Well, we know that securing our nation is dangerous work. We've seen border agents being assaulted, ICE officers being threatened. Tell us about, the dangers that our men and women are facing on the front line.
Yeah, well, for me, seeing our fallen families here with us today, I'm just reminded of the 39 agents and officers we've lost in the line of duty since we were created in 2003. And the sacrifice of those families that they've given in protecting other Americans is just tremendous. And we just try to live up to that example every day and the gift that they've given us of their family member service. So what we're trying to do is put our men and women in the best position to deal with the threats they face, to have the right training, the right tools, the right support across the technology side, which we've discussed, but the use of force capabilities and training. That's what we need to equip them with. And they're facing a very challenging environment. 125 degrees in the West Desert in Arizona, minus 70 in the North Dakota plains in the winter, very rugged terrain, and we're asking a lot of them, and we're very proud of them.
Governor, explain to us.
All right, guys, we'll bring it back into the newsroom for now. Thank you for joining us along on the stream. I hope they were able to address some of the stuff you wanted to hear about. Again, the White House saluting immigration officers from inside the East Room, and we are here inside the newsroom here at Fox 5 DC. I'm going to leave you with a cute little story from over the weekend. As you know, it was Palindrome Week last week, and all the dates lined up to be 8, and then the number, and then the year 2018. Well, a very lucky baby boy was born on 8/18/18, and here's that story, guys. With that, we'll leave you, and we'll catch you again tomorrow for the stream at 11:30.
10 toes.
She looks like my mommy.
And a whole lot of hair.
She gets her hair from her dad, I'll say that. I was really excited to see it, because if she took after her mom, she'd probably be bald.
Every detail of a newborn is special.
It is, and it never gets old. Every birth is awesome.
But little Lucy's birthday,
She was 2 days late, actually.
is extra special.
She was born yesterday on August 18th of 2018.
It's a palindrome, meaning it's the same forwards as it is backwards.
When we were getting ready to push, I was like, well, at least she'll be born on 8/18/18.
But that's just the beginning.
We didn't really think about it at the time, but when it was time to deliver, we're like, oh, we're really close to 18/18.
That's military time for 6:18 p.m.
And it just kind of worked out that she delivered right at that time.
At 18/18 on 8/18/18.
It is, yes. It's a lot of 8s and 18s.
Oh, and she has a big sister.
She's cute and sometimes, yeah, she's stinky.
Who's also 8.
I would say that 8 and 18 are lucky numbers for us at this point.
They must be to get such a lucky little girl.
I think just Lucy in general is special, so I'm excited. The date is an added bonus.